as an NBA basketball fan. It is Super Bowl week. We're going to be talking about the big game every single day here on the show. Sam Bruckhouse is from Summer Sports is going to join us. We've got a lot of basketball to talk about. Gavin Peterson and Craig Smith both joining us on the show today. Shout out to James and Alonzo for lining those interviews up. Craig Smith, Utah men's basketball head coach at noon. Gavin Peterson, women's basketball head coach at 1. Very much looking forward to catching up on both sides of that running Utes equation. Lots to get to. Normally, the weekend between the AFC, NFC championship games and the Super Bowl, you've got the Pro Bowl, you've got, in this case now, the Pro Bowl games. That, I hate to say it, it needs to be done. We need to stick a fork in the Pro Bowl games. We need to get rid of the Pro Bowl celebration. We need to do what I said. Pro football players don't want to be involved in this All-Star weekend. Go ahead and give them the recognition. Tell them, hey, congratulations, you're a Pro Bowler this year, and let them coach a college All-Star game. That is my official proposal for the Pro Bowl weekend. But normally this weekend is a bit slower, right? It's a bit of a quiet sports weekend as we all take a little bit of a breath and get ready to cover the Super Bowl. With the NBA trade deadline approaching, and we're only 3 days away from when teams have to let their deck shuffle or reshuffle or settle the way that they hope it will, the NBA dropped this mega bomb, okay? The Dallas Mavericks and the LA Lakers engage in a trade of generational significance. This was the bombshell of all bombshells, just dropped in everyone's lap like a gift. It is manna from heaven for the sports talk radio host. And your Utah Jazz are now one of the most fascinating footnotes in perhaps the second most significant trade in NBA history, maybe the most significant trade in NBA history, depending on how it all plays out. And the Jazz are a part of it. The Jazz are the third team that make the mathematics work for the Dallas Mavericks against all reason, inexplicably, unexplainably, against the better judgment of virtually every human being who's ever watched basketball, to send Luka Doncic to LA. What are you doing? James, your reaction to this was what?
So I saw it later than most because I was starting to put on a movie in bed, getting ready, and then I look at my phone, and it had been, probably an hour or so. See the alert, and I'm like, whoa, Luka just got traded. It just, as you like to say, complete banana sandwich by the Mavs. Also, I'm not sure which team is better this year because of this trade. Now, long term, you could infer that because Luka is much younger than Anthony Davis, and Kyrie's not that young anymore either. And listen, Kyrie's probably starting to look around anyway. Maybe I need to ask for a trade, like he's want to do. But obviously, long term, it feels like the Lakers are better off. But I don't know if it makes either closer to a title this year. I really don't.
Okay, I don't know if it does either. I don't think that either of those teams were going to win a title this year.
No, they weren't going to win anyway. But
I think that there's some acceptance on the level of both teams. Probably less on the Lakers front than on the Dallas Mavericks front, right? Probably LeBron James is like, dude, I'm getting older. I want more titles. I want to do this right now. And weirdly enough, when this comes down, you have to start asking yourself questions about how something like this has been facilitated. How is a 25-year-old megastar being moved by his team And you have to start asking the questions and checking boxes, a process of elimination, figuring out how anyone would come to this conclusion that this is what's better for my team.
And how
Nico Harrison.
And how close does Jalen Hood-Schifino get the Jazz to a title?
Don't, James.
I'm sorry.
Don't derail us here.
Trying to localize it. Sorry, my bad.
Yes, the Utah Jazz had to cut what? They had to cut Mo Bamba so
devastating.
They could make room for Jalen Hood-Schifino.
Devastating that they had to cut Mo Bamba.
The piece that you've been missing, Utah Jazz Nation. Jalen Hood-Schifino is on his way to Salt Lake City. No, but when you see this coming down, first of all, you have to ask the question, all right, who got hacked? Did Shams Charania get hacked? Everyone that's retweeting it and saying, no, this is legit, are they getting hacked? I'm like, is Tony Jones, has he been hacked? What's happening here? Has Andy Blarson, has he been hacked? Are all these guys? No. Okay, this was legit, all right? Check that box. Okay. Did Luka Doncic demand this trade? Did he say, I want this? Well, according to all reports, no. Okay, so check that box. He answered that question. All right, so did LeBron James, the most powerful player, maybe from a personnel standpoint, probably the most powerful player in NBA history? Actually, I don't think probably. I think it's undeniable that no player in NBA history has ever had the kind of influence over his coaches, his teammates, etc., than LeBron James has had over the course of his career. So is this something that LeBron, in all of his power, was able to facilitate for himself? And even that looks like a no, because the reports out there were that Dallas actually made the first phone call. Dallas made the first move. Dallas was the one, and when you're sitting there eating the ice cream together, that scooted over closer and did the stretch, put the arm around L.A.
Inching their hand towards your hand.
And was just like, so what are we?
Should we define the relationship?
Let's have a little DTR here. And, watching
Dorian Thompson-Robinson?
Watching Nico Harrison sit down next to Jason Kidd and talk about how Jason Kidd didn't know this was coming and how he and Jason Kidd are aligned so he doesn't have to run these things by the head coach, and seeing Jason Kidd just like blank face, deliberately not making any expression on his face.
doing the whole wipe his face with his hand thing and fix his hat, which looks like he absolutely had no idea and not sure he was in for it either.
Yeah. Now look, Anthony Davis is still a great basketball player.
Yeah.
He's a young man in the real world. He's 1 years of age.
I believe he's 32. Maybe just turned 32. Yeah.
So is he 32 and Kyrie? Anyway, he and Kyrie are both 30 plus.
Kyrie, I think, is a year older because they were freshmen, They came out after a freshman year, a year apart.
Okay, so in any case, like if the Dallas Mavericks were getting Anthony Davis without giving up the best player under the age of 25 in the NBA right now.
Like, if they'd have sent Kyrie to the Lakers even.
You'd be like, what a coup. This is incredible. And instead, you're asking this question. Okay, so Luka didn't demand this. This isn't a fake trade. LeBron didn't force this. How did someone come to the conclusion that I want to trade away my 25-year-old superstar? James, you know where my mind immediately went? The NBA is panicking about the fact that they have no ratings and no conversation. And somehow, some way, Adam Silver called all the owners and GMs together and said, guys, we need to shake this up. The NFL is about to have a three-peat by the Chiefs, okay? Roger Goodell called me, said he's got the fix in, and they've got this three-peat. They're making history, and our ratings are suffering. There's no conversation about our league.
They've hired the right officiating crew to make sure it happens.
This trade deadline is approaching, and we need to see something that will shock the world. And then they had a Squid Game competition where every one of these individual teams had to, like, I don't know, avoid the laser eyes of the giant doll. And whoever fell on the sword was going to have to trade away their best player. in order to give LeBron more help or to give a major market team more help or whatever. And somehow this is how it happened. Because when you just think about from an NBA personnel standpoint, the formula that everybody in this league tries to follow to build success, what you don't do is you don't voluntarily offload generational talents. You don't do it. And that's what the Dallas Mavericks did. They did something that in sports you don't do. Not even just in sports. Whatever industry you work in. If you are working for Disney Animation Studios and I'll localize it, right? EA Sports still has like a studio here, right? They make video games here in Utah and Salt Lake City. You are like the best phenom wunderkind coding machine they've ever had.
/ graphic designer, whatever.
You're 25 years old. You're just bang, bing, bing, bang, boom. I am making you the best game that ever existed. The next Mario Kart is coming out of my studio. And people are just like, wow, what a hire you are.
The other studios all want you.
Everybody wants you.
But EA's like, yeah, we got him. Yeah.
But then somehow EA's just like, you know what? This kid, even though our bottom line is helped by him, the product we put out is helped by this individual, him or her. This person has added so much to what we are as a competitor in our professional space, but eats too many Funyuns. Comes into the office, there's crumbs on the shirt, and I don't like the cut of this individual's jib, so I'm going to make some phone calls and see if Sony wants to, make an offer that I would easily refuse. But I won't refuse because I'm just trying to get rid of a generational talent. You don't do this in any industry.
Do you want Sony? Will you give us Spider-Man's the lead coder, lead graphic designer on the Spider-Man games for this guy, for our wonderkind?
What's a franchise of games that you've got that is kind of fun but also unreliable? Give us the head man on that one.
Yeah.
And we'll trade you.
And to be clear, Spider-Man is probably not that. That's just the first thing I think of when I think of Sony.
We'll trade you this 25-year-old phenom, and you'll give us back something that is awesome, but certainly not reliable.
Yeah. Maybe a little just starting to be outdated, too.
When you see a trade like this, you have to start thinking about what went wrong behind the scenes. What do I not know? Because what we do know doesn't make sense. It's like waking up and the moon is sitting on your front lawn. You're just like, what happened here? I thought I understood how gravity worked. I thought my overall grasp of the cosmos was pretty well intact. Why is the moon sitting on my front lawn? When you see
how did Gru mess this up?
Exactly. You're like, maybe Despicable Me was not a fantasy. Maybe that was a real life story based on true events. You have something like this cannot compute in your logical sports fan brain, and so you start to ask the questions and the answers. You're like, well, you know what? If anyone could do this, it's someone with the clout of LeBron James could make this demand and somehow, I guess, bully the Dallas Mavericks into allowing this to happen. No, it doesn't sound like he was really involved.
It sounds like there's even reports that said that he found out when everyone else found out, which I'm not sure I totally believe that, but it would tell you that I think it rules out that he wasn't involved, just like you said. Rules out that he was involved.
James, imagine the sinking feeling in your gut as a Dallas Mavericks fan with a bunch of 77 apparel, right? You got the jersey, which is a terrible number, by the way, Luka. Change that.
The only guy to ever wear 77, yeah. Certainly the only star.
You got a bunch of 77 posters on the wall. You got the home, away, and alternate jerseys of 77. And you're just like, I can't believe he's going. I thought I had another 10 years of rooting for this guy. He seemed to love it here in Dallas. Something went wrong, and I don't know about it. And then Luka puts out a statement that says, I thought I'd spend my career here. I wanted so badly to bring you a championship. Imagine the feeling of hatred you now have for your front office if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan reading something like that. Like if You were ready to turn on Luka. You were ready to go burn that stuff if you found out he demanded a trade. And instead, he's like, guys, I'm sorry. I thought I would be here. I love all of you. I wanted to bring you a championship. I thought I was going to stay here. And the GM is cracking jokes in interviews. He's like, I don't think Luka really wants to talk to me. What is happening? So you have to start asking these questions, and the answer still evades me, still escapes me as to how this makes sense. For the Lakers, it absolutely makes sense. I think your point is well made. Does it actually bring them that much closer to a championship in this 2025, the remainder of this season? Probably not. Like, maybe not. Maybe so. Maybe he and LeBron, he's got a ton of admiration for LeBron James. Maybe LeBron can get Luka to be the best version of Luka, and all of a sudden these two are firing on all cylinders, and now you've got, two of the best 10 players in the NBA on the same floor every single night. Some good things can happen there, James.
Yeah.
So maybe it gets them closer to a championship this year.
I think it definitely puts them from being probably a play-in team to solidly in the playoffs. I think that, but the reason that's one of my big takeaways from this is typically when you trade for a top 5 talent in the league, even a top 10 talent in the league at the deadline, especially if you're sending back a guy who's around that realm in the trade, typically you do that because this is what you see as the missing piece towards a championship this season. And leaves a lot to be desired from that perspective for me.
Maybe it does, but
future, it certainly doesn't. Yeah.
You can sacrifice for a trade like this. You can sacrifice whatever the remainder of this year looks like to know if you're Rob Pelinka, you're just like, well, look, LeBron is going to retire in the next 2 seasons. This might be his last year. He already did the thing where he got to play with Bronny. He keeps hinting at, like, I could do this till I'm 45, but should I really do it till I'm 45? Does he want to play with Bryce? I don't know. Like, do I have to make that happen for him as well? LeBron James, he is combating Father Time as successfully as anyone else in sports ever has, but Father Time is undefeated. So at some point, you're turning the page from LeBron James. And if it is the roster as you see it, if it's LeBron James and AD, the unibrow, whenever LeBron turns the page and just LeBron goes away, you don't have a franchise player anymore. Anthony Davis is not a cornerstone franchise building block. As great as he is, he's not the reason people are renewing their season tickets. He's not the reason that people are buying the merchandise. He's just not. He's Robin. He's a very tall, odd-looking Robin to whoever else is Batman. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that because he's so good at that version of basketball. But if you're the LA Lakers and somebody calls you and says, hey, look, I have a solution to the impending problem you have whenever LeBron James is gone. You're the LA Lakers, and the LA Lakers absolutely cannot be without a face of the franchise. You're not even allowed by the NBA, if you're the Lakers, to be a roster that doesn't have a face of the franchise, doesn't have an all-star, doesn't have somebody that the celebrities want to buy the front row tickets to come watch. And this solves that problem. Whether or not they coexist and win a championship together, to be determined. I probably think it's a strong possibility that they could make that happen together. But even if they don't, you now have a situation where your future is set. And the Dallas Mavericks had that and traded that away voluntarily. On their roster now, they have someone whose best version of himself is that number 2 role, Anthony Davis. And they've got Kyrie Irving, who from an ability standpoint is incredibly special, probably rounding a little bit over the hill basketball-wise, coming up on the final 3 years of the truly dominant Kyrie. And in the past, not for you, but in other places, has been an incredibly complicated and difficult person to work with. So now you have that as the cornerstone of your franchise.
And the greatest role player in the history of the league, Klay Thompson.
Okay. Yeah, and
who's not quite at the top of his game.
And you have 1.5-legged Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I forgot as I was going through my head, hey, how's it change these two teams' roster? It took me a second to remember that Klay Thompson's on the Mavs this year.
Okay.
So that's part of it.
If you did a blind taste test, if you did a double-blind study with every single sports executive in the world, basketball specific especially, and you sat down and you said, would you rather have a roster that has Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, or a roster that has LeBron James and Luka Doncic for the next 5 to 10 years? What would you rather have? You get to start it this year and presume that, whatever happens with all these guys is going to happen. Which of these would you rather have as your starting point?
I mean, certainly the Lakers. Certainly
There's
LeBron and Luka.
Person outside of the dude making phone calls in Dallas who makes that choice.
Yeah.
So, did Adam Silver force this? Probably not. I'm not that big of a conspiracy theorist, right? LeBron James didn't force this, it doesn't sound like. And I was like, okay, fine. For the Lakers, it makes sense. Their future is secure. Everybody's excited in L.A. Luka, whether he's happy about it right now or not, he's going to come to realize, oh, my gosh, I am now a 25-year-old basketball superstar living in Los Angeles, California, and getting to play alongside one of the all-time greats for the twilight years of his career, a man that I've admired since I was a young child. I get to be teammates with him now. Like for Luka, this works out very handsomely. So I kept asking James, how does this make sense for the Dallas Mavericks? And I still don't think I have the correct answer on that, but you have some sound. Brian Windhorst, Windy, I guess, making the Mavericks case here?
Yeah, so I know that there's a desire to say there must be more to it. And I don't have all of it. I can't say that there isn't. But I honestly believe the Mavericks came to a decision after really going through a frustrating year with Luka. It has been a very frustrating year. And just to reset that, they're coming off the finals. Luka comes to camp and immediately gets hurt. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't know everything about that injury, but I think they were frustrated that he had that injury, and they thought that maybe he wasn't necessarily ready for camp. After he gets that injury, he gets out of shape. Out of shape to the point that when he comes back and plays healthy with the injury, they say he's shut down for a hand injury, and he was injured with that, but he also was getting in better shape. When he came back, he had allowed himself to get more out of shape. Comes back, starts playing well again, and then repeats the injury. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you that was physical conditioning, but I suspect that they felt that they were not thrilled with the condition. And this summer, he's going to be in position to sign a $350 million Supermax contract. Now, most of the time, teams celebrate when a player qualifies for this. And so for the Mavericks to do this now, it means that they didn't even want to enter into that contract with him. And it also means that they thought that they could do better this season now with Anthony Davis. And so it's a high-level, shocking, and complete repudiation of Luka Doncic as a superstar franchise player.
That final sentence.
You want me to play it again?
Please. Just that last 5 seconds or so.
Give me a sec to light it up.
The Dallas Mavericks.
Shocking this season.
The Dallas Mavericks, at the end of the day, according to Brian Windhorst, are so bothered by a guy being in substandard shape that they moved off a generational talent. Go ahead.
It means that they didn't even want to enter into that contract with him. And it also means that they thought that they could do better this season now with Anthony Davis. And so it's a high-level, shocking, and complete repudiation of Luka Doncic as a superstar franchise player.
A repudiation of Luka Doncic as a superstar franchise-level player. There's nothing wrong with a GM, an owner, a coach being frustrated with a young player who's not acting as professional as you would hope he would be. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a very normal thing in sports. We see this. That's one of the problems with these elite level talents, especially a guy who's been an elite level talent since he was 14 years old, like Luka Doncic, right? It's hard to tell those guys anything, okay? You still have to try. You still have to try to figure out how to tell that guy something. How many times have we heard the apocryphal story of an owner, of a GM, of a head coach being like, you know what, Lawrence Taylor would roll out of a limousine, smoke puffing out after him, high as on whatever. He'd roll in, he'd practice, and we'd be like, how much sleep did you get last night? He'd be like, 2 hours of sleep, and he's the best player on the field. Nobody wants it to be that way. Everyone wants you to be the guy who shows up, takes care of his body, does film the right way, does practice the right way. And I very rarely defend the behaviors, the bad teammate behaviors of elite talents just because they're so talented. But no one is even complaining about Luka as a teammate. They just don't like that he gets a little out of shape. So get him in shape. Hire him the nutritionist.
Well, they did. That's LeBron James is his nutritionist now.
This is the wildest thing. It's the biggest overreaction, in my opinion. And when Windhorst at the beginning of that, he says, everyone wants to know what we don't know, right? The bigger picture. Maybe there's something else. Maybe Luka has like crazy skeletons in the closet that are going to come out. I don't want to put that evil on the guy because I have no reason to believe that that's the case. But maybe the Dallas Mavericks are getting ahead of the curve and knowing that they're trading away something that could blow up in the Lakers' face now. And they're just like, this guy's actually a huge mess that no one knows about. We're going to trade away and make that somebody else's mess. I guess that could be the case. And you better hope so if you're Nico. Because now you are on the clock. If your Dallas Mavericks don't win a championship this year, you should be fired.
And he, like Windhorst said, and Nico said it in his press conference, we feel that an all-NBA player, all-NBA defender at center gives us a higher ceiling than a top 5 player in the league right now, in Luka Doncic. They said that. Windhorst said they feel that they're better with Anthony Davis this season than they would have been keeping Luka Doncic. Yeah.
Okay.
That means you have to win, like you just said. That means you have to prove that you will be better.
And by the way, if you're an owner, you're going to say, all right, you want to make this trade? This is your job. Like, your job is on the line. Your legacy is attached to this trade. This trade is everything. You have to really, really believe, or you have to know something that the rest of us don't know about Luka Doncic to make this case the right case for yourself, to stake your reputation as a basketball executive on this. If he ends up being right, I will eat crow, right?
Yeah,
I've been
all of
wrong.
us will.
I've been wrong plenty of times before. This time I feel like I'm wrong with a lot of people if I'm wrong, because it's hard for anybody to make sense of this blockbuster trade.
Speaking of the owner, did you hear that his first reaction was to laugh?
Yes, he laughed.
But then he, right after chuckling or laughing at it, guffawing at it, he says, yeah, go ahead.
Now,
it's wild.
I feel like this man might be kind of like me, where he's really cheap. Because paying Luka $60.
And this is not Mark Cuban anymore, by the way. This is a new majority owner.
Yes, Mark Cuban's a minority owner now who has said that he had nothing to do with this, by the way.
Some people might have heard me say that, like, why don't you just say Mark Cuban? Well, it's a different guy. I don't know his name as well as I know Mark Cuban's name, but it's a different guy who's the majority owner.
Patrick Dumont.
Dumont, yeah. He's the one that reportedly, and Nico, I think, said it in the press conference. Yeah, he laughed, and then he said, yeah, let's do it. All right.
Okay. Now, making a decision like this certainly puts your name out there. And immediately, every number that the Dallas Mavericks put up for the rest of the season becomes the determinant of your future if you're Nico Harrison. Not just the wins and losses, the production of Anthony Davis, how many games he plays, how healthy he is. Of course, the same true. They're going to compare Luka and Anthony Davis's production, their wins above replacement. You're going to compare all that stuff. And you know what? If you're in Dallas and you're this owner, you should also be looking at it and saying, like, all right, what about jersey sales? What about how many beers we're selling? What about ticket sales? Is any of this going to be affected by the fact that my GM just traded away a 25-year-old superstar for a guy who's had his own share of struggles staying healthy in the NBA? And I could listen to that Brian Windhorst piece 50 different times to dissect word for word. They were bothered that he showed up and got hurt. Utah fans, Utah football fans, we should look at ourselves in the mirror a little bit about this, right? Because what we're talking about with the Dallas Mavericks is one of the best players that has ever walked through those doors. One of the best players that they've ever had. I've heard people say he is the best. With all due respect to Luka, I think that still belongs to Dirk Nowitzki.
He was on his way to surpassing Dirk Nowitzki, perhaps. Like, or being 1A, 1B with Dirk.
And
like, that's how good he was.
Like, that's how good he was.
Time.
So you had found yourself another Dirk, right? So congratulations. You hang on to that forever like you did with Dirk. And if you want to let him play till he's 41 years old, you do that. Whatever. But instead, they traded it away because of frustration, because of being bothered by injuries, something that is oftentimes said, we call it out of a player's control. In this situation, they blamed Luka for being hurt. Does that sound familiar to any of us here in Salt Lake City? This is exactly what we did to Cam Rising. But now,
not quite number 77, but number 7, right?
But now, like, now let's do this with the Cam Rising, and instead of Cam Rising being gone because of season-ending injuries, let's say that Kyle Whittingham traded him away because we got so frustrated with him being hurt after taking the team to a championship. Dallas didn't win the championship but got close to the championship. And imagine if Cam Rising had been traded away because you were frustrated by his injuries. And you got back, like, who would you get? Who would be the Anthony Davis equivalent in college football? You got back, like, I don't know, like a top 10, top 12 quarterback who actually has not won anything by himself. You got that back.
Quinn Ewers? Maybe. He got to the playoff.
If someone had traded Cam Rising for Quentin Ewers, I don't think Utah fans would have been mad about it. So
that's true.
I don't want to destroy my own analogy here.
Yeah, let's not. Okay, let's leave. You're right.
As poor as it is,
better left without specific names.
You know what? They trade away Cam Rising, and you get Shedeur Sanders instead. Like, great quarterback, hasn't actually won the thing that you want to win. So that's probably not even a great analogy. But imagine being so frustrated with someone being injured that you say, I now blame this injury on you because you're not in perfect shape, and we've talked to you about being in better shape, and you haven't figured that out yet, even though you're 25 years old and you've been a pro for 10 years. We think that you are the problem here, so we're turning on you, and we are sending you away to improve this team. It just doesn't make sense. When you try to pull the analogies, it just doesn't make sense. Would it make sense to trade away your best player if you're any franchise or any program? The answer is almost always no, unless that player, as I'm looking at Myles Garrett requesting a trade headlines, if that player is done with you, then you could be done with that player, right? The Miami Heat probably have to be done with Jimmy Butler because he's done with them. Luka, according to all reports, not done with the Dallas Mavericks, and they said, you know what? We're sending you away anyway. And it's caused me to rant for 35 minutes. So I'm going to stop now. Show today and every day is brought to you by our good friends at Les Schwab Tires. They've got the tires, the wheels, the accessories for whatever it is you drive. Stop by, tell them OC sent you. The pros there will get the job done right the very first time. When we were talking about this pre-show, James Peterson brought up, I think, maybe the most important point about the blockbuster trade that went between the LA Lakers and the Dallas Mavericks this weekend. What is the real way that this trade can affect the Utah Jazz? We'll tell you next.
I mean, besides getting Jalen Hood-Schifino.
Besides getting Jalen Hood-Schifino.
Just so I'm prepared.
The way that this actually changes the Utah Jazz future, potentially. We'll tell you what that is next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Ten years from now, the Utah Jazz are going to be a sports trivia answer. This team was the third team involved in a blockbuster trade that sent Luka Doncic to the LA Lakers, where he eventually won 3 straight championships. Who was the third team involved? Lakers, Mavs, and then you, the Utah Jazz fan, are going to be sitting there on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, if that's still running or whatever, and you're going to say, ha-ha, it's the Utah Jazz. Jalen Hood-Schifino, shout out to you. Thoughts and prayers to Mo Bamba. Never good to be released, but he'll find some footing, G League or elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about this whole banana sandwich trade. James brought up something that we have to bring it to the air, James, because this is like this is the right way to think about it. If you're a Utah Jazz fan, how can this actually affect the Utah Jazz in a meaningful way? And tongue-in-cheek, and no disrespect to Jalen Hood-Schifino, but that's not the way.
Yeah.
They could have changed the Utah Jazz's landscape and future. It just couldn't. Now, I'm going to let you make your point. I want to make my point, too. What this does tell you, as a Jazz fan, is that when Danny Ainge and company say, hey, we're going to try some big game hunting, you don't really need to disqualify any trade as a possibility in the NBA. Because if something like this can happen, then crazier things could happen as well. Now, the Jazz don't have an AD-type player asset to trade away right now to bring back somebody of Luka Doncic's caliber. But you shouldn't disqualify anything if this is a possibility. So I'll just put that out there. The more meaningful way, James, that you fear or think this could affect the Utah Jazz is what?
Well, and I'll be clear, this is nowhere near sourced, not even like scuttlebutt among the beat writers kind of thing that actually have meaningful sources, but just inferring things. We have seen all year long so far that rumors that the Lakers have interest in Walker Kessler, OC. And trading away Anthony Davis means that I think Jackson Hayes is their best center on the roster now.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's someone else, but certainly no one better than Walker Kessler on that roster. So could this signal that before Thursday's trade deadline that the Lakers will now be all in on meeting the Jazz's very steep asking price for Walker Kessler, which I believe is more than one first-round pick. They've basically told teams that are interested, including the Lakers, sure, you can have him for more than you want to pay for a guy like Walker Kessler. This might mean that the Lakers go, since we have Luka Doncic, LeBron's still at the end of his prime, remarkably. If we get a quality starting center, we might go from a team that might win a playoff series or two to a true championship contender. Maybe we're willing to give the Jazz their steep asking price for Walker Kessler.
I mean, when you think about it from like a create a team type, I'm playing NBA Live dynasty type situation, what do you need? You need a couple of all-star caliber players now in the NBA to win.
And those guys can get a bucket whenever you need a bucket.
Whenever you need a bucket. Yeah. But you need someone who can affect an opposing team's big men, who can rebound, who can protect the basket. And Walker Kessler, if he gave you 6 points a game, would be more than an adequate add to LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and whatever. And again, this is where the question comes in about how much of this trade for the Lakers is about what they can do this season and about how much of it is about what, the insurance policy for the eventual departure of LeBron James as the number one draw for your franchise.
You would need to get another bucket getter superstar to play alongside Luka, but you would feel like you can do that because you're the Lakers and you have Luka Doncic, but you would have Luka as your main star, and you would have a guy who's a couple years younger than Luka as your starting center for a long time, doing those things you're talking about.
Who's not going to be shy about doing that yeoman's work.
Yeah.
And just like give him a hard hat and a shovel, and he'll show up, and he will reap the benefits of being on the team with somebody like Luka. The other thing that's not being talked about yet, I haven't seen it talked about yet, is how significant, if Luka does have these bad habits that the Dallas Mavericks decided were bad enough that, hey, we're going to trade him away. Is there anyone out there who's been a better example, currently active in the NBA, of longevity and long-term health and taking care of their body and being available and elite for a long time? Like, LeBron is one of the best examples of that in the NBA ever, and certainly the best example of it in the modern NBA. I mean, you can go back to like Karl Malone, John Stockton. They were those guys. That's another reason why we're nostalgic about the 90s, because those guys just continued to play. But LeBron James, if anyone can get in the ear of a young guy like Luka Doncic and influence him on a positive front and say, hey, man, look what your life can be. Look what your legacy can be. Look what your career can be if you do the nutrition thing the right way, the weightlifting thing the right way, the yoga, the recovery, all of that stuff. If you do it the right way, look what your career can be. LeBron James is the most respected basketball player on the planet who's still active. He's also a billionaire because of the business opportunities he's had, not because of his charisma, but because he's the greatest basketball player alive. Like, you can't look at LeBron James and say, no, I don't want to do it the way that guy did it if you're in the NBA.
Yeah.
And now Luka's on his team. So you could potentially be adding the perfect influence to a young player who maybe needs a little bit of leadership. And then what do you have to do to fill in the blanks around them? Well, you got to get a bunch of guys who don't need attention, who don't need buckets, who don't need to be patted on the behind and told they're great all the time. And Walker Kessler is that dude. James, it's a great point and a great thing for Utah Jazz fans to probably be either worried about or hopeful for, depending on whether you believe Walker Kessler's more valuable or a couple of picks are more valuable. Because the Lakers would likely be reluctant to give that up, but I don't think they would just absolutely say no.
Yeah, and I, for one, would not like that move by the Jazz. I think that they've already compiled more than enough picks to make a couple of trades when the opportunity presents itself to get a star player or two. So there's that reason. I also know that from a team building perspective, when you're rebuilding, especially, a lot of GMs and presidents, Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck seem to fall into this category, would say you can't have enough first-round picks. I understand that. I don't completely disagree with it, but I think you already have enough for now. And I think Walker Kessler, while he's not going to be a superstar talent for you, I think that he will certainly be on the next Jazz contending team. And I don't agree with trading away those guys right now before you're at that next contending team phase of things. I would rather they look more seriously at making a John Collins move, making a move for perhaps and Jordan Clarkson, perhaps Colin Sexton. I would look hard at that. But if the Lakers are the only team that wants to trade with you for a guy that's tradable on your roster, I suppose Walker Kessler is the move if they're willing to give you that asking price.
Well, yeah, the asking price has to be incredibly high, because if it's not, like, okay, so Walker Kessler is young enough that if you think that the Jazz will be back in that contention spot in like 4 years, he's very much a part of that core. If you trade him away, you're going to have to use those draft picks to create a replacement for him.
Yeah.
Like, because that role is going to be you're going to have to fill that role on your contending team if and when that contending team comes along. You're going to need a guy who can do that stuff.
It's for somewhat different reasons, but it's the same. It's similar to why I wasn't with a lot of people around here that wanted the Jazz to trade Lauri Markkanen this summer.
Yeah.
Like, Lowry, it's because he's a star and you need star players. You might as well keep the one you got.
Yeah, when people are like, well, but at best he's like the number 2 or number 3 guy. Okay, so the problem is if you trade away someone who's good enough to be a number 2 guy
then you're to number 0 guys.
Yeah, now you have 0 guys. Now you need to draft a number 1 and a number 2.
Maybe you get Cooper Flagg. Okay, there's one.
That's right. And so that's the question you have to ask with anyone who comes calling, Lakers or anyone else who comes calling for someone like Walker Kessler, if you're a Jazz fan, or you're, more importantly, the Jazz front office, when someone says, hey, we want this Kessler kid, we really like him, if you're willing to entertain that offer, whatever the assets they're willing to give you for that, can you replace or improve upon what Walker Kessler is? Because when you get to a point where you're ready to contend again, you need a Walker Kessler type player. You need someone who can give you those rebounds, who can give you those block shots, who can give you that sort of like grunt work. And if it's not going to be Walker, who's it going to be? It's the bird in the hand versus two in the bush situation for me. But the Jazz right now are a footnote in this trade. It could affect them in a much more real way if that Laker thought process, and it's a very reasonable way to kind of extrapolate what the Lakers might be thinking, James. If that comes to fruition, I could see that phone call at least being made. I could see those discussions at least being had. I would like to see Walker Kessler stay in Salt Lake City.
I'm with you, and we'll have Gordy on twice this week as we always do, but we'll have him on trade deadline day in studio. So we'll talk about this possibility with him if something hasn't already happened by then. And a couple more things that I wanted to bring up before we head to a break. Tony Jones answering as he does a great job with answering fans' questions on Twitter, was saying that yes, you can certainly infer that the Jazz being the third team in this deal, because the Lakers and Mavs had plenty of other options to include as a third team. One of the reasons they may have chosen the Jazz is because the Lakers and the Jazz's front offices are close, whether that means Danny Ainge and Rob Pelinka, or Justin Zanuck and someone else, or Rob Pelinka, in that there's people in both buildings that are close and have a good working relationship. So that's interesting to note. The other thing is Jalen Hood-Schifino, just real quick on Jalen Hood-Schifino, he could either be your second or third point guard on a team for a long time. He's only in his second year as a pro, maybe his third year as a pro. Or if they don't think he's very good the rest of this season, they declined the player option, the fourth-year option on him, so that he can become an unrestricted free agent. So this is kind of a tryout for Jalen Hood-Schifino. Certainly I could see him being the backup point guard or the second or third string insurance point guard for a long time if he impresses the Jazz down the stretch here.
ESPN 792.1 FM have a cash kickoff going on right now. Time for your shot to win $1,000 to pay your bills. Text ASSET to 508-777-1000 for your chance to win. That's ASSET to 508-777-1000. This is a nationwide contest. The hot lunch is going to be really quick. Lowry Marketing campaigning to Adam Silver for something. We'll play you the brief sound when we come back on the Sean O'Connell Show on Utah's #1 sports talk. Utah basketball head coach Craig Smith is going to join us in about 5 minutes. This is the Hot Lunch on the Sean O'Connell Show. Lauri Markkanen loves an afternoon game, and he was given an opportunity to campaign for afternoon games to the commissioner of the NBA, and he took that chance.
Would you like there to be more afternoon games?
For sure. See my kids after the game, so that's good.
Yeah, make your case to Adam Silver to have these be a regular thing.
Every game should be very fun.
You can hear Walker Kessler, I believe, having a conversation with someone else in the background there, so apologies, not the clearest sound, but
Lauri Markkanen, like, yep, every game should be an afternoon game.
And what you don't hear is all of us laughing.
He's not
afterwards.
a very excitable character, that Lauri Markkanen.
What you don't hear is all of us laughing afterwards and Andy Larson saying, "Good job."
Just
kind of tongue in cheek. Good job.
He just really went for it. Went on a limb there, stuck his neck out to get those afternoon games. Lauri Markkanen. You got to love the guy. He's just he's the same win, lose, draw, afternoon game, night game. He's just like the same.
By the way, he's with just about all of the media that cover the Jazz and probably any NBA team. We were almost unanimously, make them all afternoon games so that we can get home. So other people have kids, whatever, for the same reasons as Lauri, but also just so that we can get home and do something else on a Saturday or whatever on a weeknight. We don't have to get home at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m.
I'm sure that Adam Silver and the NBA will happily oblige and start all the games when people can't make it from work.
Yeah.
And the arenas are at least half empty. That's definitely going to happen, James.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Your chance to see a Running Utes home game is right now. Text Utes to 33986 for a chance to win a pair of tickets. Next home game, Wednesday against the Colorado Buffaloes. UtahTickets.com also for your tickets. Take a break. We'll be joined by the head coach of your Running Utes next, Craig Smith, in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Hour number 2 begins as we've had a lot of basketball discussion. The big news of the weekend was a Lakers-Mavericks trade that sent Luka Doncic to the Lakers and Anthony Davis in return to the Mavericks. Of course, other assets included the Utah Jazz grabbed a couple of picks and Jalen Hood-Schifino out of the deal. This is certainly a groundbreaking, landscape-shaking trade at the NBA level. Everyone and their dog talking about it right now. Sports talk radio, sports television, etc. We'll stay with some hoop as we talk Utah men's basketball. Craig Smith set to join us momentarily from your Runnin' Utes basketball team. Tough trip to Stillwater. Ended up being a 72-81 loss for Utah against Oklahoma State. And really, if you want to watch the replay on this game, just watch like the first 5 minutes of the game. And unfortunately, that told the story. Now, the Runnin' Utes battled back, got closer. But when you have a rough start, a very slow start, and allow a team like Oklahoma State to jump out to a 12-3 lead, you got to try to dig yourself out of that hole. Unfortunately, Utah not able to do so on the road at Stillwater. So the up and down continues, coming off a win over Cincinnati. You got the loss, and then as we talked about in our last segment, up next will be a matchup with Colorado at the Huntsman Center. You can hear that game right here on your home of the Utes, ESPN 700. We're joined now by the head man himself, Craig Smith, joins us. Coach, how are you?
I'm doing solid, Sean. How are you?
Doing all right. Just glad to have you on the show. Been a few weeks since we got a chance to catch up to you. Want to talk about the slow start against Oklahoma State. You know, I've picked your brain before about how you can predict these things and how to manage them when they happen. It did happen, unfortunately, against the Cowboys. So what was the message to your team as they did fight hard all the way to that final whistle, but ultimately we're not able to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, life on the road is difficult. It's a mentality. It's a way of life. We always say you got to win by 10 to win by 1. We weren't able to get it done the other night. Obviously, getting down 12-3. I think they scored on 5 of their first 7 possessions, and some of that was self-inflicted. A lot of that, you got to give them credit too. I mean, they're a Big 12 Division I basketball players, and they made some plays. And I thought they were coming off a very humbling loss, and had been on the road for a couple games, and they showed a lot of vigor. And I thought we played hard, but just weren't good enough. And we had too many errors, specifically defensively. But when you get down like that, that's certainly not ideal. Now, there's obviously a ton of time left to find a way to get back in that game, and we just weren't able to get over the hump. And so, you got to give them a lot of credit. I just thought we just defensively, too many breakdowns. They scored at 1.2 points of possession, which is not good and not the standard. And for us, the games we've won in Big 12 play, we've held our opponent under a point of possession. So it's kind of a simplified way of looking at it, but it's definitely a metric that we look at, and just got to compete harder. I thought early in the game specifically, it was our screen and roll coverage that we did not do a good job of, and they're a team that does do a good job getting to the glass. We're a good rebounding team as well, but they hurt us on a couple 50-50 balls where they were just quicker to the ball and banged a couple threes. And Thompson is a kid who he went to high school, or out of high school went to Kansas and transferred to Oklahoma State. And his first kind of bigger game was against us at our place, and then he had 5 straight games of 15 or more points. And he's not a bad shooter. He's not a great shooter. He hit 2 threes in that stretch. One where we didn't get through a ball screen, and now our 5-man had to take him, and he just kind of measured us up and stuck a 3, and then another one off an offense rebound. And then we showed some grit and resolve, and kept cutting it down, but we didn't end the half as well as we need to, and they scored 6 of their last 7 possessions to go into halftime. But for us to only be down 8 at half, I felt pretty good about it. Meaning, I mean, obviously you don't want to be down 8, but all things considered, for us to only be down 8, I felt pretty solid about it. But got to keep getting better, Sean. We got to keep growing. We got to shoot the ball better. You know, I think we 5 for 27 or something like that from the 3. That's got to be better. I do think Gabe. You know, people talk a lot about Gabe. I do think he's showing a lot of signs to kind of getting out of his little 3-week funk there that he's had, and certainly shown a lot of progress. So hopefully that'll come to fruition. But bottom line is, he's got to keep getting better. It's a great league. It's a really, really good league, and you got to show up every night because these teams and these individual players, when you make mistakes, they typically make you pay.
Coach, how can you tell when a guy's starting to shoot himself out of a cold period or a slump? Like what does it look like from your educated eye when someone like Gabe Madsen is starting to maybe emerge from that darkness somewhat?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways of looking at it. I mean, obviously we're around these guys every day, so you see them in practice on a day-to-day basis. Of course, you see them in the games, but not only that. You how do they shoot it in drill work? How are they shooting it in practice? Right? What's their mindset look like? What are your conversations like? You know, with him, and he just seems like, and like this doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I feel like he's starting to make a lot more shots in practice again. And he's just looking more like himself, the way he's walking, the way he's carrying himself. You know, you get to be a senior sometimes, and it can work a lot of ways. And, you know, nobody has higher expectations for Gabe Madsen than Gabe Madsen, and maybe put a lot on himself, you know, that way. And he's in a different role in a lot of respects. He's a targeted guy. You know, everybody's game planning for it. But you can just see signs with it when you're around guys every day. His confidence level is – he's always been a pretty confident guy. I mean, you have to be when you're a shooter. You know, he's not afraid. And so, but you just can kind of see and feel it. And he looks like, you know, the Gabe Madsen that we know again.
Craig Smith, Utah men's basketball head coach, is my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Utes will look to bounce back from this Oklahoma State loss on the road with a game against Colorado this coming Wednesday. You just mentioned a minute ago about the points per possession metric, and you know that it wasn't a number you liked against Oklahoma State, and you average better than that usually. When you get into the analytics, Coach, are those numbers most useful in hindsight, like as you're doing the film study and you're kind of digesting a game post-mortem? Can you use analytics on the bench, in the moments, in the game, to improve things? Like, what is the role of those more advanced analytics on actual game day for you and your coaching staff and your team?
Yeah, I think, you know, every coach, head coach, every program has to decide what really, you know, matters to them. And you can get really deep into analytics, and we have some guys on our staff that are super deep into that stuff. I'm not crazy into all that stuff. I have certain ones. That's one of them. And so I think sometimes if you're constantly feeding numbers at guys, their minds can get paralyzed. Like, it's like, now some guys love it. Some guys are like, hey, man, let me go box somebody out. Let me go attack a rebound or two hands. And not where, you know what I mean? If you're overthinking, your feet get slower, right? If you're just playing an attack and playing aggressive, I think great things happen. But that is one thing that we will talk about at times is during media timeouts, like, hey, you know, in that last media run, there was, you know, 8 possessions, right? And they're at a 1.2 points per possession, or we held them to 0.75 points per possession, or hey, we've had what we call a kill. A kill is when you get 3 straight stops. You know, maybe 10 minutes in the game, we already have 3 kills. Like, so those are the kinds of things that we talk about in game. Nothing crazy. And then obviously, if they're hurting us, you know, with certain actions, or we're struggling with certain things, you know, on the offensive end, you know, try to talk those kinds of things out while they go. That's right. You're constantly coaching, constantly teaching. And then I just think you have to hit guys on a lot of different senses, right? Like to make it stick. But I always say, if everything's important, nothing's important. And so you got to really, you know, lock into what you believe in, right? Hammer those kind of things home. You are what you emphasize. Keep hammering those types of things home. But absolutely, we talk about that during timeouts. Not every timeout. We certainly talk about it at halftime, and then, you know, make the adjustments accordingly to help put our guys in a better position to succeed. But then sometimes just, hey, you got to play with more vigor, with more fight, right, with more dog in you and make things happen. So it's always a balance in that respect.
So we've made a couple observations as we've watched your games this year, and whether I'm right or wrong, there's a feeling, at least I get when I watched it, like I'm waiting to see which of the guys that we've seen kind of take the lead role in certain games, which of those guys is going to pop on any given day, because it's been Jake at times, it's been Ezra Asar, Keanu Dawes has been that guy off the bench a couple of times. Gabe Madsen has certainly filled that role in different games. And look, I don't know enough to know whether or not it's good to have that level of unpredictability because of the stress it can put on opposing defenses, or if it's better to have, the 1-2, the options that everyone knows is a star, and go ahead and attack them however you can. They're going to get their buckets, and we're going to use the other guys accordingly. Are you able to tell, like early in a game, who's feeling it that day, who by the end of this thing, who's going to be the one that popped and led your scoring and rebounding efforts, or who's going to be the guy that has the best day, or the two guys that have the best day, because it's happened that way several times as well? Are you able to be do you have the predictive powers to know that, like, all right, Ezra's the hot hand today, so let's ride him?
Well, I think you nailed it with our team, and I think there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of ways to look at it. And, on the offensive end of the floor, you certainly it's nice to have a lot of guys that can do things, right? It's great to have the depth and the balance, and you named it, and there's a couple other guys that have had really good nights that you didn't even talk about as well. At the same time, as a coach, you want a level of consistency, right? Like every night we know we can expect this out of this guy. Every night we know we can expect this out of that guy. Every night we know we can spend. So when you have that, there's a level of consistency, there's a level of dependability, so you know exactly what you're going to get. And quite frankly, we have talent. We were figuring, you have 10 new guys. We have, 7 new coaches. There's been a lot of newness, going on. Every team, sometimes it takes a little longer to find out exactly who you are, what you are, depending on the season. I do feel like we've really settled in on 7 guys, and then after that, it just kind of depends on who's playing well that night, which you don't always like that part of it. But we're learning and growing. A lot of these guys have never played together, and then within that, a lot of it's matchups. Basketball is such a game of matchups, right? Some teams are so good it doesn't matter, and I've been a part of a lot of those teams. But matchups can make a big difference. Oh boy, this team's a tough matchup for us. This could be a good team, but it's a great matchup for you or our team. And so you have a pretty good idea going in who you can play through. Where the other team is weak. Are they weak in the post? Depending on the post, are they weak in pick and roll? Are they weak guarding the ball? Are they weak in transition? Are they weak on the offensive boards? Are they bad getting through screens? I mean, go on and on. And how we can attack them. So you certainly have an idea going in, but at the same time, you got to be ready to play. You got to be able to compete. They're going to make adjustments. You got to make the adjustments within that adjustment, and go from there. So, we're still growing. We got to get a level of consistency to our team on both sides of the ball. Maybe some guys aren't quite as good offensively, but they're elite defensively, and so that can make a difference as well. But just finding a level of consistency and knowing exactly what we're going to get out of our team on a day-to-day basis really makes a difference, and we got to keep growing in that area.
Utah men's basketball head coach Craig Smith, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show for another minute or two. Running Utes back in action on Wednesday night against Colorado. UtahTickets.com. Show up. Be loud. You mentioned the matchup thing, and it feels like Big 12 basketball that is particularly relevant because the league, kind of like it was with football, is thick through the middle. Yes, there are teams, a bunch of top 25 teams in the league right now, a bunch of teams that have had success both on the conference slate and out of conference. But everybody can beat everybody once you get past, like, the Houston Cougars, it feels like. Like, there's just it's a coin flip every night who's going to show up and how much those matchups matter. Is that an accurate assessment of how it's been playing out for you in the Big 12?
Well, I think that's correct. Like, listen, first of all, going on the road, and I've never been into the whole road thing. It's obviously harder to win on the road, especially in a league that has really good crowds. However, I think you can make it bigger than it is as well. And so, but you do have to have a tough mindset, and you got to have tough kids, tough guys, and you got to be very, very disciplined and sound. So that's one thing for basketball. I can't speak for that for football. But then within that, right, obviously in this league, and the SEC's had a really, really good year, right? And I don't sit and watch the SEC teams. I don't have time for all that. But I know that the SEC's had like a historic year. The Big 12 is really, really good. I mean, it is really, really good. And it's awesome. I'm so pumped about it. But when you got Houston and you got, Iowa State and Kansas and, Texas Tech went into Houston and broke the nation's longest winning streak the other night. And so there's certain Arizona's really, really come on, right? So you have some teams that have been very, very good historically, and they're difficult. And then there's probably another tier in there, and it's like, but after that, like, I just feel like any game, man, there's always, I say this all the time, there's always a way to win every game that you play. But there's certain matchups within the game that are really going to feed or help us versus another team, or vice versa. Name any team in the league. And so there's a ton of depth. It's a very physical, rugged league. Sometimes you need, it's one thing when you watch it on TV. It's another thing when you're up close, and it's really, really athletic. And so, it's our first year going through this as a program. You look at some of the leagues, the team, us, Colorado, Arizona State, it's an adjustment going from the Big 12. And when you see it firsthand, it becomes very clear. We definitely, I like our guys. I like where we're at, but we know there's some different areas as we move forward, recruiting-wise, that we really have to enhance in our program, and I'm confident we will.
The Colorado Buffaloes, your next opponent, have not found a way as of yet to win a conference game. That adjustment has been most difficult for them, but that doesn't mean that you just get to roll the ball out there and automatically win. Where is Colorado still dangerous for you and your squad?
Yeah, they're going through some of the similar challenges that we've had through all the way across the board. But namely, they got a lot of new guys. They have a totally different team. They've lost a couple guys to the NBA. They have a totally different team. And so, we have an interesting blend of experience and youth and inexperience at this level. And that's kind of the same thing that they're going through. They brought a D2 transfer. He was a very good player. They brought in the NAI National Player of the Year. And so they play 10 guys, and you watch them play, and there's moments they look really, really good, and there's moments they struggle. And so it's the same thing we're going through, and so we got to be on point. Got to really guard their personnel because they play so many guys. Tad Boyle's a really good coach, been around this thing for a long time. They're very selfless. They compete very, very hard. And I feel like their last 3 games or so, they've been playing their best basketball of Big 12 play. And so I feel like they're kind of settling in on a group or a lineup of players that are starting to play more and more minutes that maybe weren't playing as many minutes 6-7 games ago. And so we got to really be on point. Got to be very, very disciplined on the defensive end. We have to play way better than we did defensively than we did in Stillwater the other night to win this game. So we're going to have to play well, and you got to be able to take care of business at home in any conference. And so that's what we got to get done on Wednesday night.
Coach, in season, how much NBA basketball do you get to watch?
Next is 0. I did see my guy Sam Merrill at career high the other night, though, so that was awesome. He actually stopped by when we played in Houston.
Saw that, yeah.
We played at Houston, so he stopped by the hotel. It was good to catch up with him for a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Well, let me ask you this then. I'm sure somebody's told you, if you didn't see it yourself, about the Luka and AD trade. Other players involved, obviously, but what I was watching, I'm watching the GM of the Mavericks sit down next to Jason Kidd, and talk about the trade and explain the thought process behind the trade. And I'm looking at Jason Kidd, and I'm going, I wonder what he is thinking right now, because his best player was just traded away. Now he gets back another great player, but a very different type of great player. And you've coached great players that have been great guards, great big men, great whatever. How different is it coaching a great player based on their skill set? Or is it just like coaching a great guy is going to be easy? If he can play, he can play. You tell me what it's like coaching, and like, obviously I'm not talking about the specific players here, but losing a Luka and getting back an AD, both great, but very different.
Yeah, I can't speak to those things, but just with my experience with different guys, so much goes into that. Who do you have around them on your team? What do they like as people? What's their, are they smart? Can they remember a game plan? Can they execute a game plan? Can they remember, sets? Some guy, I just brought up Sam Merrill. That guy had I was like probably halfway through my first year, and this guy was so detailed. He would sit before when whoever had the scout, whatever assistant had the scout was going through with the scout team, their set, he would sit and watch that. And then we'd get on the floor and we're going through walkthrough, and he could tell you what his guy's guarding. He could tell you what, the 5-man was going to do, the 4-man was going to do, 3. Finally, I was like, Sam, do you have a photographic memory? And he kind of looked at me and he goes, well, you could say that. And so, there's a level of those sorts of things. What's their competitive spirit like? Do they have a motor? Do they show up ready every day? Do they make your teammates better? Right? There's just so many things. Like, there's a reason, when you're getting ready for the NBA draft or the NFL draft or the WNBA, whatever it might be, I mean, those people are so detailed in what they do and hiring private investigators to follow their stuff. I mean, it's just so detailed and specific, and the layers that they go through to check that out. But at the end of the day, when you get a great player, oh my gosh, you can feel that. Great players give your team, I would say really good players give everybody else on the team confidence. And when you got that guy, whoever that guy is, it permeates through the organization. It permeates through the roster. And those guys make everybody better, especially if they're guys that care and love to be a part of it and are relentless with their effort, you know what I mean, and show up. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. So I just think there's so many things that go into it, and nobody ever knows really, what's going on behind the scenes. And it's easy to kind of look at it from a distance, but when you're in it, you know it and you feel it, one way or the other. So it's always fascinating to me. I said this on your show, I think one time, but as a college coach, not everything is in our control, that's for sure, especially in today's day and age, with the portal and NIL and everything that goes into that. But you not only get to coach your team, you also are the GM. Like, you can pick who you recruit. Doesn't mean you're going to get them. You might go 0 for 10. You might go 5 for 5. There's a lot of ways to look at it that way, but that's the unique thing about being a college basketball coach or a college coach in general.
Okay, 2 more things before I let you go, and I'll make them quick, Coach. Chiefs or Eagles in this weekend Super Bowl?
Oh my gosh, I can't stand either team. But,
that's the right. Hey, for me, Coach, that's the right answer for me. I love that.
I mean, I'm a Vikings fan, and although it was a rebuilding year for us, but I do love football. I love football, but the Super Bowls can be really hit and miss with our schedule. I think we're on the road. We might have a team Super Bowl watch party. We'll be in between playing West Virginia and Cincinnati, and I think we'll be in Cincinnati at that point. But if I can't do this, but if I was a betting man, it would be really, really hard to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, that I think that three-peat might be coming. And then, look, this is one of the most important sports decisions our state will ever have to face. The Utah Hockey Club is down to the final 3 names. At least we've been told they're the final 3. We could keep it UHC, Outlaws, or Mammoth. Craig Smith is team what?
I'd say the Outlaws, baby. Let's go.
All right.
I have no reason for it. I just think it sounds really cool.
All right. James, we're going to dump that part. I'm team Mammoth, Coach. So I'm gonna cut your answer there. We're gonna edit that out of the interview. All right.
I appreciate you doing that. It's probably the least popular one.
No, I think it's actually pretty close, which is why I'm going to. I don't want an influential person who's well liked in the state. I don't want someone like you lending credence to Outlaws when I want it to be Mammoth. So
I'm not sure everybody would say I'm well liked, but that's a whole other story. But
well, you're well liked around here, Coach.
But hey, I went to a hockey game in late, like one of the first games against the Calgary Flames. I'd never been to an NHL game. That was so awesome. It was super fun.
It's amazing. It really is great, and it's been fun to see how our state has embraced it, and I just can't wait to see what it looks like in 15 years when kids are growing up playing hockey here and starting to produce NHL talent and all that stuff. It's going to be fun, Coach. Hopefully we're all here for part of it. Thanks for your time today.
Exactly. I appreciate you, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
Craig Smith, your head coach, Utah Running Utes basketball. They're in action on Wednesday night against Colorado. Coach's show is live from Slackwater tonight at 6. You can listen right here on your home of the Utes and on the ESPN 700 app. That's part of our Big 12 at noon coverage brought to you by Mountainland Supply. Go to mountainlandsupply.com or stop by any of their physical locations. All right, I asked Coach about some football stuff. It's unfair to ask a college basketball coach in season about the Super Bowl, but I did it anyway. Sam Brookhouse from Summer Sports is a little bit more dialed in on the football world because, that's the job. Sam joins us next on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. A little Tom Petty. All right, James. This is well before your time, young man. Excellent work.
You not like Tom Petty?
I just don't know. I don't know about you young kids and your mumble rap. You know what I mean?
A little bit.
I don't know what you're into. Time to talk a little football. Sam Bruckhouse joins us from Summer Sports. The Super Bowl's coming. Some superstar players are making trade demands. There's no such thing as an offseason, even as the NBA tries to dominate the conversation with the Luka and AD trade. Sam, welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I love the free-falling intro. I'm out here in New Orleans covering the Super Bowl. Lots of great music out here. So happy to hear that song here in the afternoon.
All right. What's the game plan for I know you're working, but how are you a big food guy? Are you going to jump down on those beignets while you're in New Orleans? Are you too much of a professional to worry about such things? How are you going to manage the week here?
So not only am I a big food guy, but I'm from Southwest Louisiana, and I lived in New Orleans for years when I played down here at Tulane. So I've been kind of shepherding all of our folks here at Sumer Sports around. You know, last night we got some great sushi. We're eating some turkey sandwiches, lemonade, and all kinds of the good stuff for lunch, and we're just enjoying our time here. And it's a great spot to talk about football as well because of the Super Bowl.
Oh, wait, so you're probably the right person to be in New Orleans with because you know the difference between the tourist restaurants and the ones that are actually serving great Cajun food. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Look, I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but you can maybe call me Sam Bourdain from time to time instead of Sam Brookhouse.
I like that. That's wonderful. All right, let's start with this Super Bowl matchup. Look, I have rejected mostly the narrative that the referees have anything to do with the Kansas City Chiefs being on the brink of a third Super Bowl championship. I don't even mind that the game is adjudicated a little bit differently for somebody like Patrick Mahomes because that's how it is in Major League Baseball. That's how it is in the NBA. It's going to be that way in the NFL. How worried should fans be that officiating is a conversation after this Super Bowl?
I would say zero worry. Now, are people going to talk about it? Yes. But this is the game that we love. It's so complex. In fact, it's so complex. I know there was a lot of discussion about the sneak. A lot of people don't understand. They really do have chips in the ball. And when you have 22 guys on top of you on a quarterback sneak, it turns out that radio waves don't like all that poundage when they're trying to figure out where the ball is. I mean, maybe technology will continue to progress over here at Sumer Sports. We're always pushing that. But I have zero concern about the referees. They're just doing it as best they can. New York is going to call down and replay assist where they can. I'm looking forward to a clean game.
All right. Glad we got that out of the way. From an X's and O's standpoint, the Kansas City Chiefs seem like in situational football, they are better than everybody else. They have an answer to every situation that they find themselves in, and that's why they win all these close games. They haven't been as dominant this year. They've won a bunch of one-score games, but they've won those games because you cannot throw anything at Spags. You cannot throw anything at Andy Reid and have them not look to the sheet and know exactly what the answer is. Is there anybody in football who's better situationally than the Kansas City Chiefs?
Absolutely not. And here's what I'll say. On SumerSports.com, we have a lot of great statistics, and soon you'll be able to just quickly ask it a question via our Sumer Brain product. You can sign up for the waitlist now. But if you go check out some of our data tables, they're not as explosive as they used to be. This is not the same Andy Reid, Tyreek Hill offense that it used to be back in those days. This is a brute force offense. And the way that it's signaled to me is the explosive plays, the expected points added per play, the efficiency is not, super big. They're not getting explosives, but they're still extremely successful on a play-by-play basis. They're doing what they need to do, and unfortunately, not much more. But when you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, who have done this year over year over year, they're able to be consistent in that, and that is how they've attacked teams all year, and that's going to be their plan going in against a great defense, one of the best defenses in the league, in the Philadelphia Eagles.
Let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a perhaps the best offensive line in all of football. If it's not them, I don't know who it is. You've got either the best or the second best running back in all of football running behind that maybe best offensive line in all of football. And I'll get to Jalen Hurts here in a moment, but is just that blunt force trauma that the Eagles can inflict upon an opposing defense going to be enough against the Kansas City Chiefs front that still does have Chris Jones in company?
Here's my question for the whole game, and I think it'll help answer that question very quickly, is where are they going to line Chris Jones up on the offensive line when they're trying to get after Jalen Hurts? Because as you said, Jalen Hurts is the weak link of this offense. Saquon Barkley's incredible. They have two of the best tackles of all time. A.J. Brown's one of the best wide receivers. I want to see if they can start heating Jalen Hurts up. And the reason why you need to watch where Chris Jones lines up is because there's really one spot that I think they can attack, and that's Mekhi Becton, the right guard. I think Chris Jones could probably eat him up in one-on-ones, but the fear would be that they thus slide the line to Chris Jones. Against the Bills, what he did was line up against the all-pro tackle Deion Dawkins. What that allowed was them to send 2 and 3 people at the weak link of that offensive line. If Jones starts lining up on Lane Johnson, expect a blitz-heavy game plan right at Mekhi Becton. That's going to be the crucial point of the game and whether or not they'll be able to heat up Jalen Hurts.
You called Jalen Hurts the weak link, and that has been the narrative around him for most of this year. When we got to, I think, the divisional round of the playoffs, it was a bunch of guys who are either superstar franchise-level quarterbacks or individuals who've already won a Super Bowl, and also Jalen Hurts. And I guess Jared Goff was in that category as well. And look, I like his game. He doesn't do too much. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's got a decent efficiency level when it comes to completing his passes, touchdown interception ratio, and all that stuff. He's an adept runner, yet we categorize him as a weak link. Is that a testament to the talent around him, or is it perhaps truly he could be a liability in a matchup like this one?
So I think there's 3 spots of interest here. The first, which we look at using artificial intelligence, we've trained artificial intelligence to basically watch every play and log down to the millisecond what is going on. We found that he's actually a pretty accurate passer. However, he just doesn't make great decisions. He's not always, going for the throat, trying to get the kill. And given he's such an accurate passer, it's very interesting that he does that. As a result, he avoids the middle of the field. And I think that's going to be something really to watch. I think that's a massive blind spot for his game, and it's been a pain point for an Eagles passing offense that, frankly, has not been up to snuff with the entire rest of their team all year. The next thing I'll highlight is he's not the same runner. Injuries have hampered him. When we look at those same AI metrics and some of the speed calculations that we make and some of the burst calculations, he's just not the same guy that he was in past years. Sure, he'll scramble. He'll make some big plays. He's still a threat, but he's just not the same guy. And I think when the margins are super slim like they'll be in the Super Bowl, it could cause problems. I think, frankly, if they lose this game, I wouldn't be shocked if we can tie it back to the passing offense and Jalen Hurts at the head of that.
Sam Bruckhouse from Sumer Sports, my guest here for a couple more minutes talking the upcoming Super Bowl. We'll have it right here on ESPN 700 this weekend. We are your home of the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl. Actually, moving beyond the Super Bowl, Myles Garrett, he wants to be traded to a contender. And this is music to the ears of any team that needs a pass rusher, thinks they have the assets necessary to put together an attractive trade package. It doesn't seem like the Browns at first blush are hunkering down and saying, no, you absolutely are not going to get this guy out of here. They've known about his trade desires longer than the rest of us have. Mm-hmm. Where's a good spot for Myles Garrett?
Man, there's so many places. I think the one that I've highlighted the most, just given the way that Jaden Daniels played this year and the fact that they have so many free agents this year that are on their team, they're basically provided a blank slate, is I would love to see this guy in Washington. It would change the entire face of that Dan Quinn defense. And we've already seen what Dan Quinn can do with Micah Parsons. If that same mentality can be brought in for Myles Garrett on the flip side of a breakout player like Jaden Daniels, it's going to make some of those one-score games that the Commanders were so good at winning a lot more easy. And I think they now have kind of a expedited timeline, even more so over than they did this year. I would love to see him in a Commanders jersey.
That run this season by Jaden Daniels, enough to put him in a different conversation among the great quarterbacks in the league, or are you still calling him just the best rookie quarterback, and we'll see what comes next?
So, look, I was the conductor of the Jaden train. Okay. I liked him all the way back to Florida State last year when he was at LSU. They ended up losing the first game of the year against Florida State. I was like, this is a different guy. All the way into this year, knocked our AI metrics out the park. Extremely active, extremely accurate, and great at making decisions. But here's what I'm a little worried about. I mentioned how they have all the unrestricted free agents flowing out. It's a very similar scenario as they had with C.J. Stroud this year. And we saw some regression from C.J. Stroud. He ended up playing very well in the playoffs. I think he's going to continue to still be that guy. But now I've convinced myself the other way. I'd be a little careful about saying, he's a top player in this league right now, but I think he's certifiably an elite level starting quarterback there. I just don't know if he's going to be a top 5 guy next year.
I'm a Niners fan, so every time I have a football guest on, I make sure to ask a Niners question to serve my own selfish purposes. Has the Super Bowl window closed for an aging and expensive San Francisco roster that now has to figure out the right amount to pay Brock Purdy?
I think you hit it right there. It depends on what you think about Brock Purdy. If you think Brock Purdy can be the guy who he was for, the middle part of this year, where he was the conductor of an offense that had nothing in it, and they were able to stay competitive in games, then I think the Super Bowl window remains open, especially because they got Nicky Bosa over there on the other side. But if you believe that Brock Purdy is just, a Kirk Cousins level guy or a Sam Darnold level guy, then it gets really tricky. I, for one, believe that they should probably not extend him this year and play it out, and maybe like the Washington team and the Minnesota Vikings did with Kirk Cousins for years. I think you still want to see what you have because, man, that offense was hurt, and that offense is old. George Kittle, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, those guys are not getting any younger, and they certainly look very injured this year. I'd maybe hold off a year, try to see what's going on, maybe think about using the franchise tag in the future, but I just don't know if you want to spend $63 million, which it seems like it's what it's going to take to get him in on a yearly annual basis. I don't know if he's worth that amount of money right now.
I don't want them to spend that money on him. You can't build a successful roster around that guy at $63 million a year, in my opinion. But all right, back to the Super Bowl for the last thing before I let you go. Your official prediction on the game is what?
My official prediction is the Kansas City Chiefs win a close one. Here's why. The Eagles have a better roster. There's no doubt about that. They have 2 tentpole tackles who are excellent. But it just comes down to the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs have the more important players. Positional value. You remember the quarterback position is 10x maybe as valuable as every other position. Patrick Mahomes is more important. Travis Kelce has done this over and over again. Interesting matchup between him and a backup linebacker now that Nakobe Dean is out. And then Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie on the other end. They have the more important players. I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Does Travis Kelce then get down on one knee and just make every Swift in the world at the Super Bowl?
Now we're talking. I wrote like a 3,000 word article or something like that about Taylor Swift albums and how they relate to NFL quarterbacks. You can find that on SumerSports.com. So I'm deeply researched in this topic. I'm going to go no. I'd bet no proposal right now, but that would certainly be something.
That'd be the only thing that would overshadow this Luka trade. But
oh my gosh, man. Oh my gosh.
I saw you tweet about this. There's no way to escape it. Even if you're deeply entrenched in the football world, in the Super Bowl, like you are right now, down in New Orleans, that was the bomb that the NBA needed to see drop. Finally, the number one conversation piece, at least for a day or two, is this.
I was having a little bit of fun, day off Saturday, Frenchman Street, New Orleans, listening to a little bit of music, and I turn around, and there's like 100, 200 dudes on their phone just with their hands on their head. And I'm like, something must have gone very wrong. I looked down at my phone. They traded Luka Doncic. Can you believe that? And so every street corner, every restaurant, it was almost like the old days when the men used to go outside and smoke, but instead they were trying to kill time because they had traded Luka Doncic. I couldn't believe it, man. How about that?
Yeah, craziness. And we're talking about it all day. Sam, enjoy the Super Bowl. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. This is excellent.
Sam Bruckhouse from Sumer Sports doing a great job down there on the Super Bowl coverage. And, by the way, going all the way back to the beginning of that conversation, that is a cheat code if you're in a great food city that is also a tourist trap like New Orleans is, to have somebody who knows the culinary scene there and can send you or take you to the right places. Because, look, you're going to get good food, but in New Orleans you can also get, like, elite, like truly great food. You just got to know where to go. So, Sam, keep that number, James, if you're ever going to New Orleans, because he's the right guy. He could give you recommendations. Have you been to New Orleans?
I have not been to the Big Easy yet.
I've only been once, and it was fantastic. The food there, whew, so good.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the places I do want to visit at some point. Maybe, it'd be cool to check off the bucket list of Super Bowl and New Orleans, 2 birds in 1 stone, because they always like to be in New Orleans with the Super Bowl. That'd be cool.
maybe
one of those times.
Steve, our boss,
yeah,
we're sending James to the Super Bowl.
Maybe if Utah football makes the Super Bowl,
Super Bowl correspondent for 2025, James Peterson, headed down there on Friday.
The Salt Lake Stallions make the Super Bowl someday. Maybe
it's only, I think the get-in price for the Super Bowl right now is actually lower than it was last year. I think it's only like $4,000 or $4,400. That's actually a lot cheaper. The worst seat in the house last year was like $5,200 or something like that for like an obstructive view ticket. I couldn't pull the trigger.
I think it certainly tells you about the draw that is your San Francisco 49ers being in the Super Bowl. But it's a little strange that everyone's talking about anticipating history with the Chiefs, and then everyone that wants that to happen is anticipating it. Everyone who doesn't want it to happen, which is basically everybody who's not a Chiefs fan, is hate watching. You would think that price would be higher for those reasons. But, I mean, maybe it's just the brand of the Niners is a bigger deal than that.
Are you serious? Come on. This is real? $3,100 to get in.
I don't know.
At the Superdome. What?
I'm going. Now, 31. That's still way out of my price range.
You know what? This makes me upset because if I could have found a ticket for $3,100 in Vegas, I would have just drove down, gone to the Super Bowl, drove home. And yes, it would have been a very expensive ticket, but I could have said that I was there for the Super Bowl.
You could have said that you were there when the Niners lost.
Yeah.
How great is that?
Oh, no. That would have been bad. All right. We got to take a break here. When we come back, some animals, some tigers, you just can't change their stripes. Sometimes college coaches are college coaches, and sometimes pro coaches are pro coaches. I'll tell you why I'm telling you this. Also a reminder, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM welcomes Incubus to the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater coming up July 12th. We'll be giving away a pair of tickets to the show every day this week, actually. That's coming up at 1:45, so just under an hour from now. Incubus tickets. Keep listening. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Tank race update. And then we'll talk with Gavin Peterson, Utah women's basketball head coach. That's coming on the Sean O'Connell Show. James Peterson will update you on how the tanking is going. James, what are they doing winning basketball games?
I know, snapping a terrific 8-game losing streak, ruining a terrific 8-game losing streak with a 113-99 win. I was in the building for it, fuming alongside our NBA, another ESPN 700 NBA insider. We get Gordy Checketts. Spence has Richard Smitty Smith. We're sitting there going, what's going on? I lean over to Smitty as they're up 12, 14 points in the third quarter. I'm like, they may actually win this game, Smitty. He goes, can't lose them all. The complete opposite.
True. You can't.
Of what we usually say, right, OC? So there you go. That happened with the Jazz over the weekend, unfortunately, from the tank perspective. A couple of pieces of good news, though, over the weekend, OC. The Raptors upset the Clippers yesterday. They are red hot. They've won 5 out of 6.
Okay,
we love
Raptors.
to see that. Thank you, Toronto. The Nets upset the Rockets on Saturday. They're on a 2-game win streak as well, so they're separating themselves. Hornets, though, lost 2 very close games, one by 2 points, one by 8 points that they were in for most of the night on Friday and Saturday nights. The Pelicans, I texted you about this one, a devastating one on a couple of levels. Pelicans just barely miss out on upsetting the Celtics, the defending champs, on Friday night, 118-116. But to add insult to the tank injury, injury to insult in this case, they lose DeJounte Murray with an Achilles tear in the same game. One of their 2 or 3 All-Stars. So injury-prone Zion Williamson, although he's playing right now. Brandon Ingram, one of their other All-Stars, has been out for most of the season, and now they're without DeJounte Murray. So that's going to be tough for the Jazz to hold them off. But we'll end on a good note. The Wizards beat the T-Wolves, OC, Saturday night.
All right, Wizards, congratulations.
Yes, which helps the Jazz on a couple of levels. First off, the Jazz won, so instead of gaining ground on the Wizards, they keep pace. There's at least that. But also, I've mentioned we're rooting for the T-Wolves to lose too, so that if they miss the playoffs, that's an extra lottery pick. So that's pretty good. Games going on tonight. Jazz are back in action against the Pacers here at the Delta Center, 7 o'clock. Hornets host the Wizards. That's a win-win. So it doesn't matter what happens there. The Jazz win that one. You might want the Hornets to win more than you want the Wizards to, though, because Charlotte's right there with the Jazz in the tank race standings, and the Wizards are becoming increasingly insurmountable.
They're hard to catch.
Yes,
it's if your race to the bottom, they're decelerating faster
right
than
there
everyone.
at the bottom. Yes. Pelicans taking on the Nuggets tonight at 7. Not a very winnable game there, and it's in Denver. T-Wolves hosting the Kings. That one, Sacramento could win that game, although they did just trade De'Aaron Fox, so who knows. Couple other notes. Cooper Flagg, I don't know if you watched Duke Carolina Saturday night, OC, the first of the great college basketball rivalry. Near triple-double as they blow out North Carolina.
It was kind of anticlimactic. North Carolina's not good.
They're not good. They should be a lot better than they are because they have a lot of talent from their really good teams for the last couple of years still on the team, but unfortunately for the Tar Heels, not good. So they blew them out. Cooper Flagg, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and 3 steals and 2 blocks. Just filling up the stat sheet. So first real pressure-packed game for him, at least going into the game, and he lived up to the hype there against his rival. Tank race standings. Wizards still 1, 7-41. Jazz still 2, 11-36. Technically tied with the Pelicans for second, although they're ahead by 1 game, ahead in air quotes, by 1 game in the win column, as Pelicans are 12-37. Hornets 12-34. Nets and Raptors tied for 5th, 16-33. Teams 2 through 6, OC, just 4 games separating them. So still pretty close in the tank race for 5 of the 6 teams there. And ESPN 792.1 gives you a chance to take a break from the tank race, OC. Tune in Saturday night, Knicks versus Celtics, 2 teams trying to win. Isn't that great? We have it here on the station. Yeah,
2 teams that try to win basketball games.
There's other sports radio stations that can't say that, so we can. We got 2 teams trying to win on our station. Not just your home of the NBA. We're your home of the NBA games that actually matter.
All right, I love that. James just calling everyone out. Well done, sir. All right, you heard it. That's your NBA tank race update presented by James Peterson. Love it.
Yeah, we got the inside the NBA thing with the Nito stat of the night presented by no one.
That's where we're at right now. We'll get. You know what? We're gonna make it happen. You suggested there's any company out there that is associated with tanks. Maybe we can get like the Utah National Guard. They've got tanks.
Could we get a military contract or something?
Military sponsorship. That's a good one. They got tanks.
Gas stations. Fill up your tank.
Water purification systems. Tanks.
Okay. Tankless water heaters, home improvement.
Well, tankless
companies.
though, James.
Yeah, that's true.
You need someone who actually has tanks.
Full water heaters.
Actual.
I don't know. They're moving away from that in the industry. I hear
the water heater company. That's who we need. Hey, you want a tank only for the next couple of years? That's how the Utah Jazz are. You'd like to go tankless pretty soon, but you can't afford it. We can find a way.
We could do it.
Have you ever gotten a quote on those tankless systems?
I haven't.
It's getting better. It's getting better, James.
Okay.
At some point, we're all going to have them.
We're going to have to get we're going to have to get them. I know it's not quite the symmetry we want because they're talking tankless, we're talking tanking, but we have to get them on. Maybe.
My question is, when we all go tankless, what are we doing with the tanks? Everyone's going to make like smokers for their backyard out of them?
Yeah.
Chop them up?
They got to go somewhere.
Yeah. That they'll go to one of those weird stores at the Las Vegas airport where they make like the gigantic metal Optimus Prime statues. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's like that weird store that has giant geodes and like sculptures made of industrial parts. What is the audience?
Sounds perfect for them.
That is 1,000,000% a money laundering scheme. There's nobody who's buying those things.
Big Transformers fans.
For like 50, they're all like 50 grand. Can you imagine, even if you're rich, can you imagine if you show up to your house and your wife is just like, what is in that truck? Why is there a crane following the truck? I got a statue for the backyard, honey. Don't worry about it. And then you unbox that thing and it's like a 12-foot tall Megatron. You think your wife is going to be okay with that? No, nobody buys those things, do they?
Maybe Shia LaBeouf's buying all of them. He's like, I was in these movies. You guys remember?
Oh, Shia LaBeouf. Great actor. Great actor. Complicated human being, apparently, but convincing in most of his roles. All right, we got to take a break. Gavin Peterson, Utah women's basketball head coach, joins us next on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, Gavin Peterson's going to join us in about 5 or 6 minutes. Talk a little Utah women's basketball. There were several breaking stories this weekend that got overshadowed by the Luka Doncic AD trade. And, of course, the Utah Jazz are involved as well as a fascinating footnote to a very significant trade in NBA history. Keep that in your back pocket for future Trivial Pursuit and sports Trivial Pursuit games.
Especially, like you said, especially if the Lakers end up winning multiple championships with Luka Doncic, it'll absolutely be in the trivia games.
So I can't wrap my head around the idea. We played some sound for you earlier on the show that the Dallas Mavericks their thought process may be that, Luka being injured was a result of Luka being out of shape and Luka being a little bit overweight. And that is reason enough for them to move on from him. That is not reason enough to move on from a generational talent. And I understand why people do not like the idea of giving more talented players special treatment because, right, we believe like everyone should be, expectations should be the same for everybody in every organization. But unless you were born yesterday, you realize that has not been the case in human life, probably since the very beginning of time. I mean, I have no idea whether like the best looking caveman got a better share of the kill or not, but it just seems like we've done this forever. So you have to embrace the reality that as a franchise, someone like Luka Doncic, if he's 25 years old, putting up huge numbers consistently, taking it straight at some of the best defenders in the league and hitting shots that other people don't hit, that like him being a little bit chubbier than you like is probably not the end of the world. The other fascinating thing about this is how often people are mentioning the economics. Like, well, yeah, he's great, but do you want to pay that guy? I think the average contract is $345 million, right, is what he was going to get for 5 years. That's $69 million a year. That is an insane amount of money. That is an absurd amount of money. And you don't want to guarantee that money. You don't want to give him a supermax. All right, but why not?
We never have really heard that argument for any other top 5 player in the history of the game. To your point about how in the history of time, seemingly we never behave this way or talk this way about someone of Luka Doncic's talent, that is included in that. It's always, well, you have to pay him because you want to keep him.
That's right. Like, I get it. That number feels, just even that number coming out of my mouth, I'm like, okay. Like almost $70 million a year is that it's hard for the mind to even compute what we're talking about. These are fully guaranteed contracts. That means by the time this guy is 30, 31 years old, he will have cashed $500 million worth of checks from the Dallas Mavericks. More than that, right? But again, it's not like the money's not coming in. It's not like you don't have these insane revenue streams already as a sports owner that you're not getting your equal share of television revenue, that the salary cap is not very carefully calculated based on these things, that supermax extension is not accounting for the idea that the money is there. And Luka is one of those players that you're like, you know what, I'll go into the luxury tax to keep this guy around. Like,
typically, yeah, but for some reason the Mavs
the
are
idea,
thinking completely differently about it.
Let me say this. Talk to my wife. I am the cheapest man on planet Earth. I will do things that other people with a reasonable income will not do. I buy the bargain bin meat from the grocery store. You know what I'm talking about, James?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's for college kids. I don't have to do that anymore. All right?
You do anyway.
I do anyway. I will not buy my favorite cereal if it's not on sale.
You'll get the bagged version of the same
I won't
thing.
buy things like I'm spoiler alert, I'm a fool for anything that looks like it's a discount to me. Right? If you tell me that I'm getting free shipping on something, I'll probably buy it. if something that is cheaper, but I have to pay for shipping, I'm probably not buying that. I realize I'm a tightwad. I'm cheap, and I'm cheap not usually in the smartest ways. I'm an idiot sometimes about it. But even I am not cheap enough to look at the economics of my life as an NBA owner and be like, you know what? That 25-year-old superstar, he's a little too chubby for me to pay him max money. I don't like it.
I'd rather trade him away than hire him a better nutritionist.
I know we got rid of cancel culture and stuff, but, like, we're so into fat shaming in Dallas that we're not re-signing Luka because of it. It just doesn't make sense. I've tried to wrap my head around why you would do this in every different way. And I told you, I thought maybe the NBA, the conspiracy theory version of myself, thought maybe the NBA was like, hey, we need to shake things up. We need to really steal some attention from the NFL in Super Bowl week. How do we do it? Well, the only way to do it, the only way you could possibly dominate headlines today, the beginning of Super Bowl week, is to do what just happened in the NBA.
Yeah, well,
a blockbuster trade like that.
And we'll see what happens on Thursday, too. There's always, NBA trade deadline day, even though it typically does happen on Super Bowl week, usually gets its share of the headlines, too. So this is brilliant that they had a blockbuster trade like none other in the history of the league on the weekend before the Super Bowl that everyone's going to be talking about on the Monday before the Super Bowl. And then they still have the trade deadline day on Thursday, which is not a great, like I've heard some people say, why is the NBA trying to compete with the NFL by putting their trade deadline on Super Bowl week? Like, what are they competing against? More people breaking down the game that they've already broken down for 2 weeks? Like, I think it's a pretty good move by them.
Look, good for you, NBA, for carving out a little bit of that rating today, and maybe on Thursday too. But you know who has it really good right now? Any employee whose job was to write an article about the best player moved before the trade deadline, you can already write that article. Nobody else is going to be moved that's better than Luka. There's probably not going to be anyone moved that's better than AD either. Like, we keep talking about him as if he's an afterthought here. He's a top 25 player in the NBA, certainly. All right, enough of that. Although it's been fun talking so much hoop today. Let's talk some women's basketball. Head coach of your Lady Runnin' Utes, Gavin Peterson, stops by again here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Coach, what's up? How are you?
Good. How you doing, OC? Great to be on the phone with you guys again.
How much does a mega trade like this leak over into your world? I know that you're so deep in the women's basketball world and, preparing for games. You got, like, actual your job to do in this season, but it is hoop, and you guys are all hoop junkies up there.
Absolutely. Made my Sunday morning coffee that much more enjoyable. My jaw dropped, and I'm like, wait, is this a prank? Like, I wasn't really sure how to take it. So, no, absolutely. It was a good Sunday morning to kind of just digest all of that. Big time blockbuster.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the now 3-game win streak your ladies are on. Up next will be Texas Tech. You can see that game on ESPN+. Our radio waves are crowded, so we're going to have that over on our brother station, Hank, 101.5 FM, but you can listen to Utah women's basketball with Tyson Ewing and company, 5 p.m. tip against Texas Tech on the road. Before we get to that one, win over Arizona in the Power and Pink game. What did you think of your team's performance in the 67-58 thriller?
Well, I definitely loved the way we finished the game out after giving up an 18-point lead. That part, not so much. Would like to learn and grow from that in terms of how that unfolded. But, when we did lose the lead, our upperclassmen, our leaders of our program, took it upon themselves to make sure we got out of there with the W, and very proud of the way we finished down the stretch, both on offense and on defense. But, part of that growing process of losing those leads, especially against teams that want to, pick us up full court, put a little bit of pressure on us. It's a physical game, and we've got to be able to handle that, especially when we are expecting it, and then just kind of utilize the floor and space the floor and and take care of business. I thought the game really kind of flipped in favor of Arizona after we missed. We handled their full court pressure, but then we missed 4 straight threes in a row. If we make 1 or 2 of those, I think the pressure of coming up empty in those possessions is released, and I think we settle in. But because we did miss those open three-point looks by some of our best three-point shooters, mind you, it gave Arizona life, and they capitalized on it, and it made it a game down the stretch.
When your team is in, I don't know, a rough run, when you're seeing a lead evaporate or you're seeing a hole get dug, how do you decide when the right time to interrupt that is? When to call the timeout? When to interrupt the pattern if you're seeing a pattern form? Like, where is that decision made for you on the bench?
Great question, because I still think I'm figuring that out. I probably could have called the timeout a little earlier, especially when runs go, from the later part of the third quarter and into the fourth. A lot of times us as coaches, we want to keep those timeouts for end-of-game situations. But, looking back and, the self-reflection that I do after the games, I probably should have called the timeout early in that fourth quarter just to settle us in. But a lot of times we wait for that immediate timeout, or we wait for the end of the quarter to just try to maximize our end-of-the-game timeouts. But that's something I'm still trying to figure out. I have the utmost confidence and trust in our players, especially our veteran crew, that I a lot of time assume too much that they'll figure it out. So I kind of try to stay out of their way. So learning, I think I'm going to do a better job from here on out, making sure that those moments don't get too big and the momentum gets too big for us to stop. So great question. It's a work in progress, and that's the best and the most honest answer I can give you.
We can always count on you for those honest answers. Look, Arizona, as a Pac-12 opponent, like, it wasn't so long ago that, Adia Barnes was competing for national championships. Is there anything that you can learn from these other programs when they're finding their ebb and flow in a new league, in a new situation with, the recruiting landscape has changed? Adia Barnes is one of the best coaches in the land, and the season's not going the way that anyone at Arizona figured it out, or hoped they would figure it out, I should say. Mm-hmm. When you're kind of seeing that, I know you focus primarily only on your own team, but is there any lessons to be learned from seeing what happens with other teams, especially from programs that have had a lot of success?
Yeah, I still see, even though they might be, and not just Arizona, I'm sure they wanted to have a better win-loss record, but at the end of the day, the consistency component of what they play with, day in, day out, they are going to play their brand of basketball. And that's something, for me to grow as the leader of this program, is to make sure we're striving for that consistency component, and we're still playing our brand of basketball. We're still playing unselfishly on the offensive end. We're still playing at a high pace, high tempo. We're looking to shoot a lot of threes. We're still going to play the way we want to play. And then it's a matter of, defensively trying to take away our opponents, get them out of rhythm, take away some of their strengths, exploit some of their weaknesses. But there's just, you got to be who you are, be comfortable with that. And then at the end of the day, if you play hard and you leave it all out there, that should be good enough to get you to the finish line. And, I think that's what I see the most in terms of coaches, in our league. Maybe, like I said, they don't have the best win-loss record. Iowa State, they're a great basketball team, and they have an identity, and they continue to do what they do. They're in a lot of games. They took TCU to, the end of the game there yesterday as well. I think you have teams like Colorado. They still play the same brand of basketball. They still play that up-tempo style of play, physical defense. So it's not whack-a-mole where you're just trying to find something that works and you start changing. You really believe in your culture. You believe in your core foundation, and then you just really work on making the results come out in your favor.
Gavin Peterson, Utah women's basketball head coach, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. 3 in a row. Kansas, BYU, Arizona, and up next, as I already mentioned, is Texas Tech on the road. First of all, road games in the Big 12 Conference. I've asked some of your players this, and I think I've asked you this before. Lubbock is like it's a haul to get to Lubbock. You're just West Texas is a different kind of destination than going down to Tempe or like when you were playing games in the Bay Area or whatever. How much does it change the everyday for you?
It's different. You're absolutely right. But don't feel sorry for us. We are definitely taken care of within this athletic department. We have administrators that put our student athletes' well-being at the forefront. So we charter flights into Lubbock, and we'll be back after the game. So we're doing everything we possibly can from an administrative and basketball program standpoint to make sure that we are rested. We're not on our feet going through airports. So we're traveling first class. So it's just a matter of us making sure we're prepared, we're rested, making sure we stay hydrated. You can never wait till the day of the game to get hydrated. As you know, as a professional fighter, it's sometimes a 3 to 4 day process. Unless you have to cut weight, it's longer. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but we get taken care of. So, this trip, I think it's going to be exciting for us to go back to Texas. We lost our previous 2 in the state of Texas, so we want to right the ship and maybe come home with a victory and get us to a 4-2 road record in the Big 12.
Is there really such thing as momentum between games, or do you really have to take it one at a time?
I think for our program, it's a one game out of the time mentality. I don't think we want to get too far ahead of ourselves just because the league is really good. There are some gaps or drop-offs in terms of win-loss record, but, if you're paying attention and watching the game film of some of these teams, you scratch your head and be like, wow, why is their record what it is? Because from a talent standpoint, from a scheme standpoint, they're doing some really good things. So we've got to be prepared. We got to be ready. And then I think from a confidence standpoint, that's where our players can gain confidence with these wins piling up. But from a coaching perspective, it's all about 1-0 mentality, who's up next, and let's focus all on that.
Before I let you go, we've been checking in with the Kennedy McQueen situation. She's back in the lineup. The minutes are increasing. Is her progress where you want it to be?
Yeah, she's, when we played that team down south, she wanted to play all game, and she was on a minute restriction. So we made those 10 minutes. I think I went over by a minute and 30. So, why wouldn't you go over just a little, right? Push the envelope with a kid like Kennedy McQueen. So I'm glad she's back. No minute restriction. She's back in the starting lineup. So I think as she gets a little bit more comfortable, you're going to see the old Kennedy show her face again. But it takes some game minutes to kind of get that rust off. But, with Kennedy, you never have to question her effort. Her want to in terms of making winning plays, and then just we trust and rely on her. So excited to have her back in the lineup, and that allows us to have Maddie Wilkie come off the bench. And when she does come off the bench, we don't have a drop-off at all with that being our 6th player.
All right, Coach, 2 very important questions before I let you go. We got the Super Bowl this weekend, Eagles-Chiefs. Who you got?
I am going with the Chiefs, unfortunately. I think I am kind of over them. But it's just hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes and that crew. Their defense has been phenomenal all season long. Everybody talks about their offense and their superstars on that end of the ball, but, man, they've been pretty consistent all year long, so I don't see that stopping.
And then the Utah Hockey Club has narrowed it down to 3 names. The voting has picked up in Arena. You can now go look at the logos. They finally made them public today, actually.
Oh, I better take a look.
So it's Utah Hockey Club, and that actually has the coolest logo. But Utah Hockey Club,
yes.
Outlaws, or Mammoth? Which one do you want, Coach?
I agree with you in terms of the logo. I have my hat. I had my inaugural season. I'm rocking it. I love it. I love the merch. I love the color schemes. But I'm going to go with Mammoth, and I'll buy a new hat. Absolutely.
Yes, Coach. Yes. That is a wise man, Gavin Peterson. Look, you need to your counterpart on the men's team, he said Outlaws, so we had to cut the interview off. We had to dump the sound. I love Craig, but I can't get behind the Outlaws. So you and I are on Team Mammoth, Coach.
Yes, let's do it.
All right. Appreciate your time as always. Good luck on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the road, Utah women's basketball against Texas Tech. 5 p.m. tip here in Mountain Time. You can listen to it on our brother station, Hank FM. Does it have to be a brother station, or can I call Hank FM sister station? Do I have to call it a brother because the name is Hank?
All the Hank promos say your brother's station. Okay. So I think because Hank and Bob, another one of our great radio stations, FM stations, they're both male names. They're going with brother station, I think.
All right. Well, on the brother station, you can hear Utah women's basketball against the Texas Tech team that, look, they've had their struggles in conference play. They actually have a pretty solid overall record, but they can't win in conference. Life is tough in the Big 12.
Yeah, Runnin' Utes, by the way, if you're wondering why are you putting it on one of the music stations, Runnin' Utes start after the women's game gets started. They conflict there, so we're got Runnin' Utes Wednesday night here on your home of the Utes, and then on Hank FM we got right before that, starting right before that, we got women's basketball.
So you'll be able to flip back and forth during the commercials
to
hear Bill Riley and Tyson Ewing. Two great play-by-plays doing their thing. Sean O'Connell Show continues here on a Monday. You know what? This is so wild. We have talked very little football the beginning of Super Bowl week because of the NBA. Adam Silver's getting his way, James, and he might get it away. He might get his way again in the next segment. You never know. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. ESPN 792.1 FM cash kickoff is here. Time right now for your shot to win $1,000 cash to pay your bills. Text the word success to 508-777-1000. Success to 508-777-1000 for your chance to win. That's SUCCESS to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win. This is a nationwide contest on ESPN 792.1 FM for the cash kickoff. All right. I'm not giving Adam Silver his way for the next 10 minutes, all right? I'm not talking NBA basketball. I'm not talking about the blockbuster trade. There are some football headlines that need to be addressed.
What do you have against NBA basketball on NBA Day, the Monday before the Super Bowl? That is officially NBA Day.
It's not NBA Day, James. There's no day that's NBA Day. We don't have NBA Day in the United States.
Well, not until now, anyway.
Luka,
the Lakers, and the Mavs made it. Well, let's give the Mavs the most credit there.
Yeah, it sounds
the Mavs and Nico Harrison made it NBA Day.
Very specifically, it was Patrick Dumont and Nico Harrison.
Yeah,
if Harrison is to be believed, Jason Kidd was blindsided by this like everyone else. I would quit that job. I wouldn't actually quit that job because he makes a lot of money and it's a pretty sweet job, but
I wouldn't be very happy.
Nico Harrison, imagine the phone calls this guy is getting. Imagine the emails. We need to do a segment. We need to get in touch with someone in the sports information department with the Dallas Mavericks and just have them send us like 1% of the hate mail that guy gets so we can read it on air.
Yeah. They can blur out the names and email addresses. They can redact certain things in the email, but we'll read it.
Redact the inevitable death threats and and the horrible language. But yeah, give us the silly and creative ones because I mean, this guy, if Dallas does not win this year, he is going to be fired and he's going to be persona non grata in the greater metroplex of Dallas-Fort Worth for however long. Insane. But I'm not talking about that in this segment right now. What I want to talk about is a couple of like pretty huge coaching headlines as that carousel continues its spin. Chip Kelly has moved on from his position as offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Now,
coordinatorless now.
You are now
Columbus.
coordinatorless.
But I'm not allowed to complain because they just won.
Yes, that's right. You're not allowed to complain, James. As an Ohio State fan, you cannot complain.
We're not going to do that. You know,
Buckeyes,
most years I'm not allowed to complain.
Your Buckeyes are getting fit for championship rings. You can't be like worried. Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to take a few years before they're great again.
I'm worried that Ryan Day's going to have to call plays again.
Ryan
Day did not go well before.
Ryan Day's going to call Urban Meyer. Okay, and Urban Meyer is going to be his offensive coordinator.
Ooh.
Role reversal.
That'd be wild.
It would be insane. Chip Kelly is taking a job as an offensive coordinator with the Raiders. And if his reported salary is correct, the dude is making insane money. Like $6 million. That can't be right. That's like head coach money.
I mean, his former NFL head coach, maybe he was able to leverage that, even though he wasn't particularly successful.
I just don't believe it. And now Tom Brady is in the building, and Tom Brady might be the one who's saying, like, look, just pay the guy. He'll make $6 million per year in his return to the NFL, according to Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. That's a lot of dough. There were 4 coaches, I saw this graphic earlier today, 4 coaches who made the college football playoff as head coaches this year who made less than half that.
That's crazy.
Now, I think this is like Chip always fancied himself an NFL coach. When he was the head coach at New Hampshire, when he was building things at Oregon, he had in mind that he was going to be a head coach at the highest level. And he had a couple of opportunities in the NFL to be a head coach. He came back to college after stints with the Eagles and the 49ers, and he was a head coach at UCLA. And Chip, one thing I love about this guy, got to know him a little bit because he was the coach of of Jeff Schwartz in that Oregon team. So when we would go down to Pac-12 media days, I would have a chance to like actually talk to Chip. He's also a big fight fan, which was great. We could break bread over that kind of stuff. And Chip was pretty honest about the fact that like all of the mess around college football didn't really make sense for him. He didn't love the shaking hands and kissing babies. He didn't love the NIL promises. He didn't love kowtowing to boosters and things like that. He wanted to coach football. That's why he took the Ohio State job. Checks a box that he had yet to check in his career, and he got a national championship. He'll have that ring. And then his old buddy Pete Carroll calls him, and now he's off to make more money, $6 million a year in the NFL as a coordinator with the Raiders, who I think are going to draft a quarterback in a couple of months. So Chip Kelly goes to the NFL. He always, I think in his mind, viewed himself as an NFL coach. Ryan Grubb is doing the opposite thing. Ryan Grubb, who made his name working with Kalen DeBoer and became one of the hottest coaching commodities in all of America by doing so, is now rejoining Kalen DeBoer at Alabama to be his offensive coordinator. And this would not be as big of news if Ryan Grubb had taken like a low-level head coaching job, or if Ryan Grubb was an offensive coordinator at a place like just lesser than Alabama, which of course is most programs in college football. But Ryan Grubb was working for the Seattle Seahawks. So this is a guy who had graduated out of college football, away from the recruiting mess, away from the bizarre circus that is NIL and the transfer portal. He had made it. He was off to Seattle, and now he's back in the college football ranks. Obviously, coaching shakeup in Seattle, and it means that Ryan Grubb is going back to what he knows, and he's at Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. Now, this should terrify everybody, because Kalen DeBoer by himself is an awesome coach. Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb together were unrealistically good with the offense. They had a bunch of experienced guys that loved playing for them so much, they forewent NFL opportunities to come back and chase a championship where, yes, you're making some money, but we're not talking about like a couple of dudes who might have been day 3 picks. This was guys like Rome Odunze, first-round pick. Michael Penix Jr., first-round pick. Who was their offensive lineman, the big offensive tackle? His name will come to me. These are like individuals who were staring down the barrel at millions and millions and millions of dollars and were somehow convinced, no, let's chase this championship.
3 losses in 2 years with those guys together, too.
It's unreal.
And at the doorstep of a national championship.
If you're at Alabama with those resources and the recruiting that they're able to do. Now, they did an excellent job grabbing meaningful players in the transfer portal, and that was fun. And Washington made a great year out of it. But it's just, this is a different thing with those two guys at the University of Alabama. Everybody in the SEC, everybody nationwide should be bothered by the fact that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb are reuniting with the Crimson Tide. I don't love it.
Is this more of an indication that he and Kalen DeBoer's relationship is that strong that he's able to say, hey, Kalen's calling. I don't care that I've got an NFL job. I'm going to follow him to Alabama this season? Or is it more of an indication that with how things went, which admittedly was not as bad as people would say it went in Tuscaloosa this season? I mean, they were still a pretty good team, but falling short of expectations, that Nick Saban's expectations that he built this past season in Tuscaloosa is an indication of Kalen DeBoer and that program's how desperate they were, and they're like, we're gonna toss him all kinds of money to come back to the college ranks.
It feels like Kalen DeBoer probably had like a sit down with whoever is, the puppet master down there, and honestly, Nick Saban is probably heavily involved in something like that, where they're just like, look, man, it's hard to be the man that replaces the man. So how do you set this guy up for success? You give him a bunch of blank checks, and you say, go get whatever you need to be successful. And for Kalen DeBoer to acknowledge that he's at his best with Ryan Grubb by his side, and vice versa for Ryan Grubb to acknowledge that, like, look, we were an unbeatable team. We did great things together, and we almost won that national championship at Washington. At Washington, who, by the way, like 4 years before that was pretty solid, but not elite nationally. And 2 years after that is like, maybe they'll win some games this year, right? So, like, Washington, all respect to that program who's done some great things, those guys were the reason Washington got back to where they were at. And now they're together again at Alabama. And the fact when Ryan Grubb had an opportunity to probably hang on and stay in NFL circles and decided to come back to college, that I think is a strange and probably tough acknowledgement for someone to make. Like, hey, I'm a better college coach than NFL coach. Or maybe it's a money thing, but I don't think it's a money thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a money thing when Chip Kelly's getting $6 million to be a coordinator.
True. I mean, yeah, it'd be hard for any college football program, collective, whatever, booster, group of boosters to be able to come up with enough, with the amount of money that they can come up with for offensive coordinators at the NFL level. That's for sure. So yeah, it probably is more of the relationship with Kalen DeBoer, and like you said, maybe a tough realization that at least right now I'm a better college coach than a pro coach. But I'm with you. Scary for the rest of the nation that those two are back together.
I'm trying to find the salary for Ryan Grubb as a coordinator at the University of Alabama, and not getting a real number yet. So we'll have to report on that another time. Take a quick one. We'll wrap the show up next. I have tickets to give away in our topical trivia. Incubus coming to the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater in July. 2 tickets to Incubus if you can answer my trivia question. That's coming at you next. The Sean O'Connell Show. We'll do a little crosstalk with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Couple of Incubus tickets for you. If you can answer this question at 877-353-0700, Incubus is coming to the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater. Huge trade news in the NBA. The Dallas Mavericks and the LA Lakers engaged in a trade that also included the Utah Jazz, which is fantastic. This renders Luka Doncic ineligible for the Supermax extension, which would have averaged how much per year? How much money per year would Dallas have had to pay? We were talking about that about 30 minutes ago on the Sean O'Connell Show. How much per year would his salary have been under that new Supermax, which, of course, he is now not eligible for because you have to stay with your franchise. Anyway, Sean O'Connell Show wrapping up here. Time for some crosstalk brought to you by our friends at Advanced Windows. If you need new windows, buy direct from the only local manufacturer, Advanced Window Products. Sales, installation, warranty coverage, all that is done in-house with no middleman markups. Get $2,500 off 10 windows or more. AdvancedWindows.com, 801-850-9100. Tell them OC sent you, or you could tell them Spence Checketts sent you. It doesn't matter as long as you get your great windows. The Drive with Spence Checketts is coming up next, and he joins me here in studio. Hello, Spence Checketts.
Hello, Sean. Same team. Just go to Advanced Windows, Spencer OC, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just go get some new windows.
But OC.
Yeah,
But
no doubt.
Yeah.
Hello, happy Monday. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Lots to talk about.
Yeah,
today.
good weekend for you.
It was an interesting weekend.
Yeah.
Took my kids to their first NHL hockey game
Oh,
yesterday.
nice. Very nice.
That was fun.
Yeah.
1-year-olds don't love sitting for 3 hours to watch hockey, or 2 hours, I should say, to watch hockey.
Sure.
So that was hilarious.
But at that age, do they sit still to watch anything other than like Disney on Ice or even that?
Even that.
Yeah.
No, but it was a blast. It was an earlier puck drop, so took the opportunity to take the girls out there. It was a lot of fun.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Like this weekend has been wild. I've talked to as many people as I possibly could get a hold of. I efforted every NBA front office person I know, and I got about 4 or 5 replies. And I haven't heard anybody say they knew he was available, and I haven't heard anybody say they fully understand why Dallas would do this. Now, my antennas, I was telling you this off air, whenever something makes no sense in sports, my antennas go off with the ownership group. Because, you know what, kids? Here's a lesson we're going to learn together on a Monday, right? Buckle up, settle in. Some of the dumbest people I know have made the most money in the world. Like, we do this thing where it's like, okay, he's made billions of dollars, he must be brilliant, and it's just not true. In fact, I think the more intellectual you happen to be and the more of an overthinker you are, stops you from actually taking risks to therefore make money. It's a lot of the dummies that just decide to go in one direction and make a ton of money. So we do this thing where we're like, all right, they own sports teams. They've made billions of dollars. They must be brilliant. Maybe they're not, because a lot of the dumbest high school buddies I have are now my richest friends. And I don't know much about this new group who just took over from Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban about an hour ago was like, I didn't know about any of this.
Yeah.
But this new group, we're learning a little bit about them, the Adelson Dumont ownership group. People in Dallas claim that they don't give a rip about the Mavs. They don't really care about basketball. They're trying to use the Mavs as a means to an end, which is opening up the largest untapped gambling market in the country. They want to open up a massive casino resort in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and the new Mavs arena is kind of the goal that they have to basically put up a smokescreen and say, this is what we really want to do. We are slumlords. All this gambling money is available. We know that there's an untapped market. That's all we care about is making a grip of money. And they overpaid for Cuban's share. I mean, the reason Mark sold his interests is they came to him with this offer. He's like, all right. And Mark's a smart guy at the end of the day. So he took their money, and now he's not involved. And I was telling you this off air because you said to me, well, maybe they didn't want to pay him the Supermax. If you don't want to pay Luka Doncic the Supermax, you are in the wrong business.
I'm the cheapest person I know, and even I would be like, well, that money's coming in.
Yeah.
A lot of it's coming in because of somebody like Luka.
For sure.
So I'm going to crack off his share.
Yeah, and I just wonder if the owners have this idea in mind where they're not going to invest in talent. And you know, it's funny. Luka's so good that we're talking about Anthony Davis like he's Hassan Whiteside.
Right.
You know, like he's really, really good. Anthony Davis is still really, really good. Nico,
top 15, top 25.
There are really smart basketball people, Sean, that still think he's a top 5 player when he's healthy.
Okay.
Really smart basketball people. And I used to debate and argue with Locke over this. Locke never liked him. I'm like, wait, what's not to like? Now, he hasn't been very durable, but Nico Harris, the Mavs general manager, has a long-time relationship with Anthony Davis. And so a lot of people are surmising, like, no, Nico is one of the basketball people that believes AD is still like top 5. And the other thing is there's always, things happen behind the scenes that we just don't know about. Luka ran Rick Carlisle out of Dallas. He does not show up to camp in shape at all. He plays himself into shape, and he's usually ready about right now, but he's been hurt. The Jazz side of this is they just continue to facilitate moves, and they're just a snake hanging out in the grass. At some point, maybe it's their turn, but it's not their turn anytime soon. But I'm stunned. It's wild. Like, a De'Aaron Fox trade is a really big deal.
Nobody cares.
No one wants to talk about it today.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
It was the blockbuster the NBA needed this week, right? We've been talking all season about how the ratings are down and how the NBA is falling out of favor and whatever else. There's not a person in America with any kind of sports bone in their body who's not talking about this today. So I think Adam Silver engineered this whole thing to get a little attention.
It's funny you say that, okay? Because I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy in sports or in politics or in religion or life, and I usually mock people who are. But this is so odd that if you want to tell me today this is orchestrated, because the other thing, Sean, that really sucks, what the Lakers just did is they reset their franchise for another decade, even after LeBron is done.
Yes.
Right? And so if you're the guy today with your tinfoil hat on about the NBA, I don't know that I can push back after how crazy this has been.
It's like, how do you give insurance to your number 2 major market team that they're going to have a face of the franchise whenever LeBron in the next year, 2, 3 years decides that he's done? Well, a trade like this is the way that you can make it happen.
And, when you look at the history of the Lakers, they've always been able to do this, whether it was Wilt and then Kareem and then Magic and then Shaq and Kobe and Pau Gasol and then LeBron. No one talks about the Eldon Campbell, Nick Van Exel Lakers, and then LeBron and now Luka. They've always been able to facilitate this thing. And, there are a lot of people, at least in my experience, that don't love what LeBron has done to the NBA. You have to respect his career. You have to respect the fact that at 17, we told him, you're the next generation's great, and he was. It's wild. But it's starting to get exhausting. Like, after the trade went down, Chris Haynes tweets out, he's like, breaking news, LeBron to stay in Los Angeles. I'm like, that's not breaking news. He's under contract for the Lakers. Like, I do think the LA stuff is fatiguing for people, but the problem is, if you're anti-Laker, they just reset their franchise for another decade.
And by the way, LeBron might be the exact right person that Luka needs to be around because he respects the heck out of LeBron. And LeBron is this model of professionalism and longevity. Luka hasn't had that guy as a teammate yet.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah, and no, there's a video going around of last year after the Mavs won the West. Right after the game, Luka cracks like this German lager, and he's just down at a beer. And Nico actually walks by him, and he takes it from him.
Yeah.
And look, you just won. Have a beer. I'm not judging you. But there has to be something behind the scenes where the Mavs didn't like the fact that he doesn't stay in shape or whatever it is. You don't trade Luka Doncic at 25, though. You just don't. That's my takeaway.
We tried to figure out. I was asking every question, and there's not an answer to the question, and it still doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you're going to get to hear Spence Checketts speak about it from his informed perspective for the next 4 hours right here on ESPN 700. The correct answer, by the way, $69 million per year is what Luka's Supermax would qualify him for. I'll take it. Stay tuned for The Drive. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.